Good evening, and welcome to Pynchon Pals, a podcast about finally reading Thomas Pynchon. My name is Patrick Fiorilli, and I'm joined, as always, by Andrew Tillett.
How's it going?
And Dury Long.
Hello.
On tonight's episode, we are discussing chapters 4 and 5 of Thomas Pynchon's The Crying of Lot 49, a book my esteemed co-hosts are reading for the first time. You can newly support Pynchon Pals by going to patreon.com/PynchonPals and signing up for $5 a month to get access to bonus episodes and Q&As. We just released our first bonus episode for the month of February covering Paul Thomas Anderson's film The Master, which is loosely inspired by V. And we are announcing now that next month, so March's bonus episode, will be a Q&A episode all about Crying of Lot 49. If you have lingering questions about V, you can ask those as well, or just like general stuff about books or Thomas Pynchon or whatever you'd like. So get those questions in. We may answer a smattering of Lot 49 related questions intermittently on the podcast as we get them in. So don't think that maybe the only way to hear your question read aloud is the Patreon episode, but that's where most of them will be. So again, patreon.com/PynchonPals is the URL for that. And the email address to get in touch, as always, is pynchonpals@gmail.com.
I was going to suggest that they could write a question in about the master as well, but while I was waiting for you to finish your thought, I decided I didn't want to answer any questions about the master, so don't do that.
You can if you want. We might have. There might still be some gas in the tank on the master. Who knows? But it's a really good episode. If you haven't heard it, you should go listen to it by signing up as a patron.
Great episode. But I curate the questions and answers, so you can send as many emails about the master as you want to send in, but they ain't getting through this filter.
Yeah, if you want your question answered, you need to curry favor with Andrew Tillett.
Well, we did it, gang. We are over the hill on The Crying of Lot 49. This book goes fast. We've only got a small chapter remaining.
A little too fast.
You want it to last longer?
So cluttered. And there was a lot of times where I'm like, if this book was 1,000 pages long, we could really chew on some of this meat. And otherwise, we're just flying through it. It's too quick.
I've been struggling a little bit with this book. In fact, I reread almost the whole book last night because I
watched it happen, and I was at some point I was like, did my co-host read the book the first time, or
I've been powering through. I had kind of a busy week. I read this new segment and was getting close to the end, and I was like, I'm really not sure I got anything from that. You know how when you're reading quickly, or maybe this, I don't know if this happens to you, but when you're trying to read something in a time frame, sometimes you do a little bit more of a high level read of very descriptive sections that don't seem like they're necessarily contributing to the plot. And I feel like I was doing that on the way through this book. And let me tell you, readers, that is not the way to read The Crying of Lot 49, because most of the book is these really descriptive, long sentences that feel like they're not important to the plot. But if you get to the end of the chapter and you've kind of done a high-level read of the whole thing, then you aren't really getting anything. So I had to go back through and re-chew on things and draw some additional connections and do a deeper read of the descriptive bits that I had maybe skimmed a little before.
I do think, especially for chapter 5, if you're only looking for things that are character name I recognize, does an action, there's not a lot going on in that chapter, and yet
it jumps back and forth between these sort of killer scenes in the chapter, and then in between you just get 11 sentences where in each sentence Oedipa is in a new location talking to a new individual and receiving a new clue, and I don't even know how to describe it. It's like mile markers. You have the individual miles on the highway, and then you have all those point ones that are just blasting past you.
Yeah, and the meat of it is in some of the description, I feel because I was like, oh yeah, okay, she's engaging with this unhoused man, cool we're skimming a little, we're moving on. And then I was like, no, actually, I feel like the meat of the chapter is like in that paragraph where we have like a lot of description about that interaction. So suffice it to say, I have read this chapter twice now.
And you're very well prepared for that reason, I'm sure.
Well, we'll see.
So yeah, maybe that's a little bit of prescriptive advice that Pynchon Pals can offer you, the listener. Just like go back and read it again.
Read it again. I was telling Patrick that like when I was reading V, I feel like I settled in. There's something about like a thick book that tells you that like you're gonna need to sit down with this and like chew on it for a bit.
Wait. Let me get my tally marker ready.
But when you
you're
open
reading,
a slim volume,
there it is.
Like The Crying of Lot 49. You're like, oh, it's going to be light. It's going to be breezy. We're just going to like vibe our way through. And turns out you need to chew on it also. So I think all Pynchon might require a little bit of chewing, slim or not slim.
I think this is kind of what I meant, like coming off of V, when I said that Lot 49 is just a much denser book. And it has those kind of like lengthy digressions that you're exactly right. In a long novel, there's so many parts that add up to the whole that like any one of these lengthy digressions may not be something that you absolutely have to remember for the book to function. But here, there's such an economy of space that, yeah, like every one of those multi-page long paragraphs is kind of essential and important things are happening because otherwise it wouldn't be there.
Did you, Patrick, tell an anecdote, perhaps apocryphal or otherwise, at the beginning about why this book was so short? I feel like you mentioned something at some point, and maybe I guess in the last episode, about why this book is 150 pages long.
Yeah,
it feels like it at points could have written under the gun.
I think that's kind of how Pynchon talks about it in the intro to Slow Learner, which is where most of his appraisal of it, I think, comes from. I can see if I can track that down.
I want to say you said that like he was under like kind of a publishing deadline. He was working on Gravity's Rainbow at the same time.
Yes, he was definitely working on Gravity's Rainbow at the same time. This is kind of a thing about Thomas Pynchon that several people have said, is that for most of his career, he's always been like, yeah, I've got like 4 books going right now. And that kind of eventually, I think, comes to bite him in the ass a little bit when after Gravity's Rainbow comes out, obviously there's a big, big, long gap before the next book where, you know, people who have encountered him have been like, yeah, he's been working on Mason and Dixon for 30 years or something. And it just like shuffles around from the front burner to the back burner. But I did find something he says about Lot 49, that after the stories that are collected in Slow Learner, he writes, the next story I wrote was The Crying of Lot 49, which was marketed as a quote-unquote novel, and in which I seem to have forgotten most of what I thought I'd learned up till then. So, I think he is kind of labeled it as like an overstuffed short story a little bit, and I do think there was something about fulfilling a publishing contract as he was working on Gravity's Rainbow, but I'm having trouble tracking exactly that thing down, so maybe I can in the meantime for the wrap-up episode.
This book would be fascinating if it was 400 or 500 pages long. I feel like every single thing that we get that is one sentence just being expanded upon in the way that I'm used to Pynchon from V, and here it just happens only a handful of times. This book would never end. And I don't know if I'd want it to. I think it would be really fun if it was just like of incredibly dense mystery.
Yeah.
That'd be really good.
Well, we've got some...
it still might be really good.
We've got some lengthier detective fiction coming up from Pynchon in just a few short 700 to 1,000 page novels. We'll get there eventually. Should we jump into the first chapter, chapter 4?
Yeah, do you have a Patrick summary, a chapter summary for us, Patrick?
It is kind of a Patrick summary. Welcome to the Patrick Summary Corner. This is chapter 4. Oedipa starts to spiral. Reflecting on constellations, she pays Yoyodyne a visit and meets an engineer doodling a muted post horn. She fakes just enough familiarity with underground mail systems for Stanley Kotex to let slip the name John Nefastus, who's allegedly got a real live Maxwell's Demon machine up in Berkeley that can violate the laws of thermodynamics. She confers with Metzger and Fallopian back at the Scope, and meanwhile tracks down the edited volume containing the Courier's tragedy, which features a penciled note about an alternate version of the Tristero line contained in a hardback edition also published out of Berkeley. Following up on a roadside sign commemorating a male-related massacre, she visits one Mr. Toth at an assisted living home who keeps the yarn spinning. Metzger's stamp expert, Genghis Cohen, gets in touch about irregularities among Mucho's collection. Many of the stamps are forgeries, albeit with obviously conspiratorial alterations. Cohen reveals to Oedipa that the Tlön and Taxis family used what else but a post horn, unmuted, as its symbol.
On the cover of the book. It was a real clicking moment for me.
Oh, yeah, your cover. It does have the little stamp on it.
Yeah, my cover specifically.
Yeah.
Mine too.
Yeah, this is like, I think this chapter moves in part of this was just the way we broke up the book, but I do feel like chapters 4 and 5 work as kind of like a 1-2 punch, where this chapter is like on the shorter side, like it's mostly like conversations and actions taking place, and we kind of learn a lot of concrete facts about this mystery. And then chapter 5 is maybe somewhat less that.
Yeah, I feel like I read chapter 4, felt like I got it, and then when chapter 5, I was like, oh dear. I have a question about your chapter summary, Patrick.
Yeah.
You said it was Mucho's collection? Was it?
Oh, sorry, Pierce's collection. You're
okay.
right.
Just,
Yep.
keeping things on the up and up for our listeners.
Except I'm certain that I wrote Pierce earlier, but somehow the content of my message seems to have changed. What's this? An alteration on my computer? No, it's just a speck of dust.
As I was listening to your chapter summary, I was appreciating sort of for a second time the very good names that are in this book. I think it's very funny that we have both a Mr. Fallopian and a Mr. Kotex.
Yeah, that's an interesting place to start. Why does Oedipa keep meeting these men who are named for sort of feminine-related nouns and proper nouns? You've got Stanley Kotex, obviously, after the sanitary products.
We all know what a Kotex
brand.
is, Patrick.
But we have a lot of international listeners, and I'm not sure if it's an international brand, if I'm being completely honest. But yes, those of us in the States know there's only one name in feminine hygiene products. Mike Fallopian, obviously, which we kind of talked about. I feel like there's another one.
Someone else?
Yeah, there was another one that I was thinking of.
I liked Genghis Cohen, not feminine.
Genghis Cohen is so funny.
Really funny.
It's the funniest name.
What I do want to talk about really quickly, since we brought up Genghis Cohen, is a really, really funny comment from one Thomas Pynchon. So this is from, I now have J. Cary Grant's companion to The Crying of Lot 49. Shout out to J. Cary Grant. Once again, published by University of Georgia Press. There's a note to Genghis Cohen that reads, in the New York Times Book Review, July 17th, 1966, Pynchon has the following reply to Romain Gary, who charged that the name Genghis Cohen found its way into The Crying of Lot 49 from his own novel. So this is a guy who who claimed in the New York Times Book Review that Thomas Pynchon stole the name Genghis Cohen. And here is Thomas Pynchon's response, published as a reply in the New York Times Book Review. I took the name Genghis Cohen from the name of Genghis Khan, 1162 to 1227, the well-known Mongol warrior and statesman. If Mr. Gary really believes himself to be the only writer at present able to arrive at a play on words this trivial, that is another problem entirely, perhaps more psychiatric than literary, and I certainly hope he works it out.
Damn.
Which,
Oh my!
it's stuff like that that's the reason to dive into these companions.
Being a notoriously reclusive writer and breaking your silence to drop that burn is...
I'd be flattered, frankly.
It's an iconic thing to do.
We need to get Thomas Pynchon to be a little annoyed at us so that he he mentions us in some fashion.
I'm sure he can find something to be annoyed at us over in these many hours of us talking about his books.
Yeah, certainly somewhere.
I mean, imagine if he came out of nowhere to address when we accused him of not knowing when that baseball player started playing.
Yeah.
God, that would have been awesome.
Oh, Emery Bortz. Emery Bortz is the third one. Then Emery Borg. Yeah, that was the third one.
I didn't even make that connection at all. That's a good one. That makes sense.
Yep. Maybe we'll get there as we continue going. But it is an interesting thing. This chapter kind of begins with Oedipa's doodling the post horn and writes underneath, "Shall I project a world?" Which was very nearly the epigraph to my dissertation, but I decided against it in order to go. I didn't want to have two epigraphs, and I already kind of decided on one, but it nearly made the cut, I gotta say. Why did she write this? What kind of
epigraph?
Yeah,
I was going to say shout out to his dissertation, not to his epigraph.
You could shout out to Victor Hugo too. That's Notre Dame de Paris is good too. What kind of world is Oedipa projecting? Why is she asking herself whether she should project a world?
Well, I feel like she's exploring like how to project Pierce's world. She says she's kind of reflecting on how he has left her as the executor of his will. And she's frustrated. Like she really wants to understand sort of his whole portfolio. And there's this really funny line where she says, "If only so much didn't stand in her way, her deep ignorance of law, of investment, of real estate, ultimately of the dead man himself," which made me laugh. And she kind of goes from that into this question of, shall I project a world? So I feel like she's trying to kind of make sense of Pierce's portfolio will, maybe without like any of the knowledge that she needs to make sense of it. So she's engaging sort of in the act of projecting it.
Yeah, I mean, in that next sentence, it talks about several constellations. And I guess when you think of sort of a wayfinding tradition with constellations, that she's like trying to build her map of this mystery.
I like that. I think the interesting connection to the constellations is that, there's like an arbitrariness to constellations, which is that like, yeah, you could draw this pattern over here, or, you could also pick this other cluster of stars to look at. And I think the like projection of this world has a certain amount of that arbitrariness to it as well, where it's like, these are patterns, yes, but one thing we know cognitively that people are really good at is just finding patterns and identifying them. Whether or not, philosophically speaking, those patterns are real entities or whether or not other people agree with those patterns. I think the connection to constellations is a solid one.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like for these two chapters, she's really kind of like searching for those patterns in the stars and finding them when she squints closely enough.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely being overwhelmed at points, I guess, in the way that if your job was to look at stars, you could become at points incredibly overwhelmed by just the number of points of light that you'd be looking at, and like trying to resolve. Sort of like if you say the same word over and over again, it loses meaning. If you're just like staring and like looking for these symbols, they all sort of bleed together.
Yeah, and like which symbols are actually important and what's background noise. I feel like she's having a hard time discerning that.
Which is also like a kind of a space problem as far as radio telescopes or any other kind of stellar observation is like signal from noise. This is also, we had a break in between recording the first episode of Lot 49 in the second, but I want to remind us, thanks again to J. Cary Grant for reminding me of this. In the previous scene with the director, Driblet compares himself to a projector in a planetarium. So this is like kind of follows directly on from that imagery, which I just wanted to mention since if you're reading this in real time, you're probably like, why aren't they talking about the fact that a guy just compared himself to a projector before on the page previous?
Kind of reminds me of what I tell my students about qualitative research, which is that you're playing a role as the interpreter of the data. And I feel like the director is playing a role in like projecting the play on stage. He's not just like literally enacting what's on the page. He's playing a role in like bringing it to life. And I feel like Oedipa here is playing a role in bringing this mystery surrounding the post horn and Pierce's holdings to life. It maybe wouldn't even exist without her action in this space.
Well, and this director especially is enacting and bringing to life because he is also an actor on stage. So he gets to have his cake and eat it too. Should we talk about Yoyodyne?
Yeah, Oedipa goes to visit Yoyodyne. She visits a building. I learned a new word, a Quonset building, which I've definitely seen before, but didn't know what it was. Apparently, it's sort of like a, what do you describe that shape as? A tunnel? Sort of like a tunnel-shaped building?
Like a semicircle.
Like a semi-cylinder.
Semicircular prism?
A half cylinder.
Right. I think it's a half cylinder. Yeah.
Not a semicircular prism? I'm pretty sure that's right.
Anyways, they're made out of metal. Apparently it's a naval building that was like pretty easy to construct, and a lot of them were built and then some of them have been repurposed for other things. In this case, for the Yoyodyne cafeteria, which I thought was interesting because both this building and some other things we see later on, I feel like Yoyodyne, like we have this building that's been turned into the cafeteria. On the next page, we have sort of what feels like a naval song, but it's a song about the company. And I feel like I don't know, I just feel like there's some interesting lines here of like the sort of military. I mean, we know that Yoyodyne is sort of like a military to industrial complex. And I feel like we're seeing that literally in some of these the architecture of the space and some of the types of activities that the folks are engaging in.
Yeah. And the sort of rousing song that's being sung is sung to the tune of another song as well. It's sung to the tune of Aura Lee, which was also used by Elvis as the basis for Love Me Tender.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I saw the Cornell alma mater song, which is also Thomas Pynchon's alma mater.
Yep. Bloody Chicklets is here. Apparently, Bloody Chicklets, I didn't really realize this, but it is a reference to the sort of like stock idiom, do you want a mouthful of bloody chiclets?
Like the gum?
Yeah, like I'm going to punch your teeth in, and my euphemism for that is, do you want a mouthful of bloody chiclets?
Interesting.
Chiclets, the like gum candy, have been around for a very long time, apparently.
I like chiclets.
No?
You know what else Bloody Chiclets is that I didn't realize?
What?
A Canadian new wave band from 1996.
Okay, hell yeah.
I listened to them a little bit last night. It's not bad. They have one album.
Bloody Chiclets, if you want to come on the pod, anytime, stop by. Also, shout out to the who is it? Mandy Moore's husband, who is in the band Dawes, who was in an Architectural Digest video recently and shows off his extensive collection of first edition Thomas Pynchon novels.
Whose name is Taylor Goldsmith.
Taylor Goldsmith. If you want to come on the pod, Taylor Goldsmith. Or Mandy Moore, if you want to come on the pod.
We would welcome you.
We would welcome you.
Talk about your Thomas Pynchon collection.
We've only read 1.5 Thomas Pynchon books, but we'd love to talk to you about those 1.5 Thomas Pynchon books.
And eventually the rest, too.
And eventually the rest. So you can take a rain check. It's kind of nice to have Yoyodyne back here.
Feels familiar.
Yeah. It's like somewhere out there, Benny's roaming around. I know that because Yo-Yo-Dine's here.
They feel so much more playful here. I love that they're, even though this is, I guess, their ICBM factory.
So playful.
They're so playful. They're just, I mean, this song, where they just name drop every other aerospace company.
Yeah.
Iconic.
Well, it seems like they've maybe fallen on harder times in terms of their contracts with the U.S. government since the heyday of the 50s, where Stencil was visiting their plant. One of the lines in the songs is Yo-Yo-Dine, contracts flee thee yet. DOD has shafted thee out of spite, I'll bet. So,
yeah, when we saw Yo-Yo-Dine last, they were exploding. I mean, they'd gone from yo-yos to weapons.
But
yeah, maybe they lost
weapons,
some
but
money.
they're not doing that well
On the whole like shock experiment from back in V. Maybe that didn't really pan out per se.
Benny Profane cost Yo-Yo-Dine their
billions of dollars.
That experiment had a lot of money riding on it that he let overheat.
Oh, shout out to Anthro Research. Yeah, we don't hear about Anthro Research, so that subsidiary might just be long gone.
Yeah, who knows?
They had to cut them out, tank the stock price. Do we think Yo-Yo-Dine's publicly traded? I guess they are. You can be hold stock and it not be publicly traded, I suppose.
Yeah, it seems like it though. If they're just inviting sort of like you could show up. I mean, this is what Oedipa does. It'd be like, I am a stockholder. Would seem to imply that there's at least some sort of public
Can
trading.
you actually do that in the real world? Can you just like show up somewhere and be like, I'm a stockholder? How much stock do you have to own to be able to do that?
They don't they don't really do in person, I don't think, like this anymore. But yeah, you could listen to the like SEC mandated quarterly earnings calls, and you can call in and like ask questions. Like investors, I don't even think you have to own the stock necessarily, but investors will like call in to like ask questions to the CEO and stuff. Like if you ever listen to one of those like all the way through, and I think they will. I want to say I've received invitations from companies I've held stock in to come to things, and I'm like, well, I'm clearly not, because I own like $300 of your stock. I'm not showing up to Las Vegas, but I do think they might be required occasionally to have in person.
That could be an exciting
and
hobby.
if you hold stock in companies that you show up to.
Yeah, I mean, sort of venture capitalism and stock trading is an exciting hobby for fun and profit.
I feel like it could be an exciting hobby to just like sort of pester CEOs in your free time.
There have been times when I've wanted to call into CEOs and be like, I need you to answer for this.
I own
$50
$50 of your stock, and you owe me 20 minutes of your time to tell me.
Which is basically what Oedipa does.
Yeah.
In fact, she might be a legitimate stock owner at this point, depending on what Pierce's, has left her. Who's to say?
Before she runs into Stanley Kotex, we have this description of her sort of like wandering around the office in her heels, and no one is like looking at her. And she kind of thinks that she'll just walk in and someone will like help her. But they don't. And she describes the room as being very like fluorescent. And she says all she could think of was to put on her shades for all this light and wait for somebody to rescue her. And I feel like this starts a little running theme that we see throughout this chapter and the next, where Oedipa seems kind of afraid of the light. Like she's constantly putting on her shades or like being startled by sunlight. And that reminded me of one Benny Profane from V, who also was afraid of the sunlight.
Yeah. That's true. Well, the last time we see her in her sunglasses, she has those bubble shades when they're looking at the Remedios Varo painting, and Pynchon describes them like filling with her tears, and she wants them to like entirely close up her eyeballs with tears. So, yeah, she is always kind of like shielding her eyes a little bit.
Yeah, I'll point it out again when it comes up, but I noticed that throughout these couple of chapters is that she's always being described as sort of like shying away or being afraid of the light.
Yeah. And also kind of expecting, like, Oedipa seems like someone who, for better or for worse, kind of like walks into a room and sort of expects to be noticed.
Yes.
And then is a little off-put when she is not noticed. And that also recurs several times in these chapters.
Yeah, I think she expects to be an object of desire wherever she goes.
Yeah.
I have to say, before we get too far into the Stanley stuff, the first time I saw the words Stanley Kotex on the page, I went full Stanley Yelnats and was like, this must be something. Is this Stanley backwards? And then read Ski Talk and was like, I don't think that means anything.
Little holes reference for our
Little
listeners.
holes reference. It looks like it looks KOTEKS. Looks like it should be something backwards. Like it looks like a palindrome, but it's not.
No, it's a homophone.
I'm really belaboring this point.
It's okay. It's okay you didn't know what Kotex was, Andrew.
I know.
It's all right. Yeah, what's the deal with Stanley here? He's doodling a muted post horn. That's the first thing.
He's wearing wire rim bifocal sandals, argyle socks.
And he's a young guy.
Mm-hmm. And Oedipa approaches and sort of drawing on the visual that she saw scrawled on the inside of the women's bathroom at the bar. She says, Kirby sent me.
Yeah, this is that rereading paying off.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was a funny line. It says it was supposed to sound conspiratorial, but it came out silly.
Kirby
which it
sent
would
me.
if you were just like repeating something you saw on the side of a bathroom stall.
Yeah, so they kind of have a little bit of a back and forth here where Kotex is sort of bemoaning the state of scientific research and invention at a, large corporation like Yoyodyne and saying like we get divided into these teams and like no one takes any responsibility for anything.
This really cracked me up. As someone who works in design, the line, isn't it all teamwork now? Really got me. It's all about collaboration and teamwork, but they're like, there's no Thomas Edison anymore. Like all these people thought that they were going to be individual inventors, but now we're all on teams and it all belongs to Yoyodyne.
This is what this guy should have dropped out and gone to work in his parents' garage, like all the good inventors. And instead, he got a real job, and now he's on a committee, and it serves him right. But yeah, he wants Oedipa to, I guess, petition Chiclets to do out with their patent clauses in the contracts, where if they do something on Yoyodyne's time with Yoyodyne's resources, it would still belong to Stanley.
Good
And I
luck,
just know he's
Stanley.
got good ideas that he's holding back on.
I can't even do anything on Northwestern's time with Northwestern money and have it not belong to Northwestern. So good luck to Stanley and Yoyodyne.
Do you want to add that the views you express here on this podcast do not reflect?
I think that view does affect the view of Northwestern. That is, in fact, the legal standpoint that the university takes, and other universities, too. They are not unique.
No, certainly not. No, I mean, this is kind of, I think, it was recently in the news, especially in the Biden administration, the like protections around like non-compete clauses and, trying to strip away some of this like corporate power of like, yeah, you can never work in this field again, or you can never do any projects on the side so long as you're an employee of some company or another.
I worked at a company once where they gave you like sort of a crystal statue if you received a US patent for them. And there was one guy who had like a pyramid of them. He had like 10 because he just invented the whole like thermal system for the spacecraft we were working on. And so he just had like every individual part was patented, and he had a literal pile on his desk of these crystal, like, you did it champ statues.
That's so funny.
What a flex.
What were you saying, Dory?
Oh, I was just going to say there was another article that came out recently about how some universities really went all in on like the profits that they could make from like inventing things. And that has caused some financial issues at universities as they've invested like venture capitalists in the like intellectual property of their faculty, which has had some effects on like the mission of the university and its broader like financial structure.
Yeah, everybody's got opinions on public versus private ownership and mail systems. A lot of this book, oddly enough, it's kind of weird men ranting about things. You notice that? Which is happens in V as well, but like especially in this book, there's like, here's a guy, he has a strong opinion about something and he is ready to share it.
That's just the experience of being a woman in the world, Patrick.
Yeah, but this is where I'm going, is that like, can Thomas Pynchon write women, as we've been asked in a Q&A in the past? And like, I think in this respect, I think this book is very much about that experience.
In which Oedipa runs into mansplainer after mansplainer.
Uh-huh. So Kotex is mansplaining in this instance, after the stuff about invention, this guy, John Nefastus, who he says, like, now there is an inventor. He's got this machine that is a Maxwell's demon.
And by God, we're all hoping that Andrew can explain this machine to us.
Or at least explain part one of this machine. What's the deal here?
I watched a Khan Academy video on Maxwell's demon. I was thinking about it. I was like, you know who can explain this? Mr. Khan. And he had it. He had it in the bag. So the whole thing is that not typically, the law that is the second law of thermodynamics, is that I got an A in my thermodynamics class, guys. I'm about to butcher the hell out of this. The second law of thermodynamics states that in a system, entropy is always increasing, and that is like the lowest energy state. So the system just being the universe or, whatever, a cooler could be a system. So the way that the Nefastus machine works is using the Maxwell demon hypothesis. If you had a system that was split into two halves, and I guess it's like filled with a gas, the individual gas particles all have a specific energy, like kinetic energy, as they're bouncing around. Some of them are moving quickly and some of them are moving slowly. And then what we observe at like a macro state is the temperature, which is basically just like the average energy of the particles in a system. So if you've got like cold water, individual molecules of water in your container might be moving quite quickly, but as a whole, they're moving slowly. Sort of the average speed is slow, so the water feels cold. And if you've got boiling water, individual molecules might be moving slowly, but as a whole, they're moving quickly. And so Maxwell's demon basically works by identifying individual atoms or molecules' speed, individual air molecules is what they're talking about in the book, speeds, and it sorts them using a trapdoor. So like if an atom or molecule from the cold side is moving particularly quickly, it'll let that pass into the hot side. And if there's a slow-moving molecule on the hot side, it lets that pass into the cold side. And so it creates sort of two hemispheres where one side is quite warm and the other side is quite cold. But it's not actually doing any thermodynamic work on the system technically, and so it should be violating the second law of thermodynamics. And then the actual Nefastus machine is just a box that does this, and it has a piston on top that you should be running the way like a steam engine would run.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is that what the question was?
Yes, I think that's a great summary. I think that the thing that I know about this is that like when we hear the word demon in a contemporary context, we're inclined to think of like a devil thing, like a kind of supernatural or like evil entity. But there's like a long history of demons in like the context of philosophical thought experiments. So like Descartes' demon, for instance, is this thought experiment where like, what if everything that I perceive around me, like all of the stimulus, all of the phenomena that I believe that I perceive is actually like a trick by some demon. And so like there's the sense of the word demon that is more like an agent that does like some particular thing for the sake of a philosophical argument. But it is also fun to think of like I can't think of Maxwell's demon without thinking of like a weird little imp guy like operating a trapdoor with a lever.
That's what I pictured.
Yeah.
Which is like not wrong necessarily, but
yeah, it's I don't think it's not important to note, but Maxwell himself, I think, was, my understanding, very religious and definitely never said the word demon. He would have been not cool with that, and that it was Kelvin who later coined the phrase Maxwell's demon to describe what Maxwell was talking about.
But so just a like, I guess, etymological or like philosophical point there, I guess you could say, that this is where that's coming from, I guess.
But if I'm understanding correctly, like this actual thing can't happen because there's not a demon there sorting the molecules.
Yeah, the
reason this can't happen is like a bunch of people have responses for like why this can't happen. So J. Cary Grant has like a 15-page explanation of this that I parsed some of, but like one of the bits that did stand out to me is that like when Thomas Pynchon was writing this book in the 60s, one of the responses to this Maxwell's demon problem was in a very kind of cutting edge quantum physics explanation is like, in order to perceive those molecules, like in order to perceive them visually or using any other kind of like physical perception, like light would have to bounce off of them, and that light bouncing off of it is going to change the heat or the energy in the system to some degree. So you have like a thermodynamic observer effect going on in whatever system that you're observing. You can't observe it without, having some thermodynamic process at work, and therefore the demon who's supposed to be observing the state of the system is adding energy, is doing work in the system. So that was like one response that would have been contemporaneous with this novel.
I think the crux of the like sort of solution to his paradox, because it would be true that if you had a system that could sort atoms like this just spontaneously, then you would be violating the second law. But it's, I guess, that Maxwell isn't considering the demon as part of the system, and that in practice, if you had a computer or something, it is part of the system, and it is introducing, or it is the work it is doing as it runs is adding entropy into the system as it's sorting these atoms. It's sort of an analogy I saw was that like your refrigerator makes the air colder, but at the back of it, there's a compressor unit that is hot, right? Like it is not just like sapping temperature out of the air inside to nowhere. Like it is producing heat out of the back of the refrigerator through the radiator.
And not to belabor this point one more time for our listeners, but Andrew, can you tell us one more time what entropy is?
Yeah, that's the harder question. Entropy is
there's another great quote from Thomas Pynchon here where he wrote an early short story called Entropy, and he wrote at one point later on that like he's always been really interested in this concept of entropy, and in Slow Learner he says that his grasp on the concept of entropy, quote, becomes less sure the more I read it.
That's honestly how I feel about physics.
So it is like
broadly.
It is a thing that is kind of bothersome to Thomas Pynchon. It's like I feel like I should be getting what entropy is.
It's basically just sort of like the disorderedness of a system. So yeah, to think of like if you had like ice cubes in hot water, you've got an extreme amount of orderedness because the cold ice cubes, like the cold atoms in the ice cubes, are in one very specific location and the hot water is somewhere else. But like a system is always going to tend towards like the lowest energy state, which should have the highest amount of entropy.
Gotcha.
So it's a big like heat exchange, work exchange kind of entropic.
Gotcha.
And you can have entropy in systems that aren't thermodynamic, which we talk about. I mean, we talk about informational entropy in here as well. So like,
Yeah, I
if
was
you've got
wondering
like
what that
bits
was.
if you've got like bits on a hard drive or something, then you're doing work to convert bits to like a known state. And they would otherwise be like, you know, in a random state.
Some of the like names that Pynchon is drawing on here are, you know, like what's his first name? Claude Shannon, I think, is like the Claude Elwood Shannon, who was like a big figure in the origins of like information theory and information science, where he was one of the figures who was trying to come up with these sort of like entropy equations for communication. And what Nefastus, we're not quite there yet, but what he will claim is that entropy in an informatic sense, in a communicational sense, doesn't just look similar to entropy in a physical sense, but they in fact are the same thing. And this is where if you have someone who is sensitive enough in like a psychic sense to the state of matter in a particular system, they can influence the organization of the matter in that system in an informatic sense, psychically, by staring at a picture of Clerk Maxwell on in front of a couple of pistons.
I, a communication scholar, have learned something new today.
We've all learned something new today, and we will be, I guess, returning to the scene of the Maxwell's Demon Machine in the next chapter.
This is all just a tease on the tease.
Yeah.
Of it. We go deep in a few minutes.
It's just a teaser. Yeah, so he like tells Oedipa about this and says that only people with the gift are able to do this work of the Maxwell's demon, sensitives, they're called. And he sort of accidentally tells Oedipa where John Nefastus lives and then tries to backtrack.
Yeah, speaking of sort of like entropic communications and like increasing disorder, Oedipa is trying to convince this person that she's in on the game and just kind of starts taking some guesses and swings at like, oh yeah, I mean, this is where she gets the like Kirby sent me business. But
and she doesn't learn from that. She just keeps throwing out buzzwords until she gets called out on saying the wrong thing.
Yeah, she says waste instead of WASTE. And he's like, it's WASTE, lady, an acronym, not waste. Which amused me.
Yeah, but more to come on WASTE as well.
Don't get the acronym wrong. Thomas Pynchon loves an acronym.
He does. Is there anything much else more to say with Kotex here?
Just that she sort of debriefs on Kotex with her friend at the scope. Fallopian?
Yeah, Fallopian is here and Metzger is here. This is like the only time Metzger is in these two chapters, I think.
Yeah, we just kind of forget about Metzger for a little bit.
He's here and he gets into an argument with Fallopian about Marxism again.
And says, you're so right wing, you're left wing. And then Oedipa sort of like recalls sort of a series of ventures that she's gone on to like learn more about this mystery.
Yeah, a couple of episodes happen here that are not exactly linearly connected.
Yeah, like the time is a little fuzzy about where she went where.
This is a very extended flashback.
It begins with this historical marker that was way back in Fangoso Lagoons that talks about an 1853 conflict between a dozen Wells Fargo men and a band of masked marauders in mysterious black uniforms.
This was something I had to look back up on my reread. I was like, why do they keep talking about Wells, Fargo?
Oh, I was on Google Images looking up this.
Oh, yeah. So Wells Fargo, the bank, apparently used to not just be a bank, but also an express mail service in California during the gold rush. It was faster and less expensive than the U.S. Postal Service, and Wells Fargo also operated sort of a western portion of the Pony Express at one point.
Which we called the Pony Express would be showing up in this book.
Yes, we did.
Go us.
So, yeah, this was Wells Fargo men are essentially like private postal service men. Were battling against these people in black uniforms, which might call us back to the Tristero folks that we saw in the play directed by Driblet.
Yep, indeed. And then we don't really kind of dwell in that plaque for a minute. Instead, Oedipa goes in search of the used bookstore, Zap's used books.
Well, first she tries to call Driblet to get more information, but he doesn't answer.
Yeah.
Then she goes to the used bookstore.
Yeah.
This reminded me of like sort of a mystery that you might get yourself involved in, Patrick, where you like read an annotation in a book at a used bookstore and then go on a hunt to a library that's like several hours away across the state and get something on interlibrary loan and then look at it and are directed to want to meet a professor at a university
this
who
is
has
the
more
dream.
Information. This is just what you do.
This is the dream. Yeah. I think, I mean, this also feels to me like it's a very Jorge Luis Borges-esque mystery of Borges famously like a librarian, and a lot of his stories deal with kind of like paper trails and, you know, mysterious copies of books. The story, what is the name of that story? Orbis Tertius is part of the name of that story, but it's about like these parallel worlds that exist kind of in books, but slowly start to encroach on the real world. And it feels very much of a piece with this.
So what does she find in this book, Patrick?
She finds that in this used book that is the Jacobean Revenge Plays paperback, someone has penciled in a line next to the Tristero line. They've penciled in CF variant 1687 edition. And then at the back, or at the copyright page at the front of the book, she finds that this is a reprint from a textbook, Plays of Ford, Webster, Turner, and Warfinger, published by the Lectern Press, which is in Berkeley. And that is the hardback edition from which this play has been taken. And so she hopes that this variant might be reproduced in the hardback.
Then she leaves that there, and we're back with the historical marker.
Yep.
Yeah, and she has a good quote here, which I think illuminates, or rather, Thomas Pynchon has a good quote here that illuminates maybe some of the shall I project a world concept that we were reflecting on earlier. She says she goes back to the marker because she has what you might have to call growing obsession with, quote, bringing something of herself, end quote, even if that something was just her presence, to the scatter of business interests that had survived in veracity. She would give them order. She would create constellations, which I think, again, puts her in this position of the director, bringing herself to like interpret all of this information.
And at this point, she follows back up on that roadside historical marker by going to, what is it, Vesperhaven House, home for senior citizens.
Senior citizens home. And she finds a man.
Which is also was owned by Pierce.
Yes. And she finds an old man nodding, and he's like in front of the TV, and he's watching a Looney Tunes program.
Yes, this is Mr. Thoth or Toth.
Thoth.
Y'all know who Thoth is?
Thoth.
Y'all look up Thoth?
No.
So I know Thoth from Plato's Phaedrus dialogue, which is all about two things. One, it's about sort of like language and writing, and two, it's about erotic love. Great dialogue, highly recommended. Everyone should go read it. I've taught it in several classes. But in this dialogue, Plato has Socrates tell this myth that involves Thoth, who is basically the like Egyptian deity of like writing and communication and messages. So he becomes associated with Hermes, who is also like courier of the gods, like in the Greek Hellenic tradition. And the story that Socrates tells in the dialogue is basically that like Thoth invents writing, and then the Egyptian king is having a conversation with Thoth, who claims that writing is going to be like an amazing tool for memory. It's going to like augment everybody's memory. We're never going to forget anything again. And then the king replies that like, well, writing isn't really a mechanism for remembering anything. It's a mechanism for reminding you of things. And so what you're doing is you're offloading the cognition, you're offloading the thinking, you are offloading the wisdom onto this like piece of paper, these marks down.
Distributed cognition, but in kind of like a bad way, because then, as Plato uses Socrates to argue this, like the argument that you're writing, the wisdom that you're writing isn't like real wisdom anymore. Like it can't defend itself. It's not really part of a dialogue. If someone misunderstands it, then like they misunderstand it, as opposed to, as you might imagine, a sort of like dialectical or dialogic sense of wisdom being passed on, where if a student has a question, they can ask the teacher, and then the teacher through a dialogue can kind of like explain things back and forth. Writing takes all of that out of the equation, and suddenly you're just left with some words written down that have no life of their own or genuine wisdom to impart. They just kind of like remind you of things. And in fact, you yourself might get, less wise or stupider by writing all of this stuff down instead of just remembering what is important. And so Plato is kind of like using this myth of Thoth as an example of the dangers of writing in comparison to the like authentic speech and dialogue that can happen between teacher and student. Writing is like a dangerous thing. Interesting.
So this is Mr. Thoth, who has trouble remembering things, and also some takes his place in a book that is all about sort of like miscommunication and symbols that have ambiguous meaning.
Yeah, so he's sort of woken from a dream by a nurse who's trying to get a fly away from his head. And she's like yelling at the fly. And she's like, this fly is disturbing Mr. Thoth. But the fact that she's swatting the fly is what actually disturbs Mr. Thoth and wakes him up. And he starts telling Oedipa about a dream he was having, which sort of mixed up his memory of a story that his grandfather told him about when his grandfather used to ride for the Pony Express with a Porky Pig cartoon, which I did watch last night. I don't know. I guess you watched part of it.
You did a lot last night.
I did, Andrew. I wanted to be prepared for today because I
listened to Canadian rock music.
I was watching Porky
cartoons.
Pig. I in fact watched several Porky Pig cartoons.
God, I love that little guy.
This one was interesting. It was called if anyone's trying to find it, Thomas Pynchon describes it as the one about Porky Pig and the Anarchist, but the actual title is called The Blowout. And there's this bomber, I guess he's an anarchist. He's sort of just pictured as someone who like sets off bombs, and he's dressed in all black. And so when he goes,
kind of looks like a vaguely racist caricature of someone.
I did feel it was racist, but I didn't know. I was too far removed to know of what.
Yeah.
And he, like when he goes into a dark room, all you see are his eyes. And he's dressed I guess you could say sort of like the Tristero characters. Like he has this big black hat and this big black cape situation. And the funny thing is that so Porky Pig, I'll just tell the story of the cartoon. Porky Pig
in which Pynchon Pals retell Platonic dialogue and Porky Pig cartoons. I've never come up with the episode title in the episode before.
There we go. Porky Pig wants like a soda from the soda fountain, but he doesn't have enough pennies to get the soda that he wants. And in this episode, Porky Pig is like a little pig. He has not grown up yet. And he realizes that if someone drops something on the sidewalk and he picks it up for them and gives it to them, they will give him a penny to thank him for his time. So he does this for a few people. And then the anarchist comes along and sets down his little clock that's like a ticking time bomb. And Porky Pig picks it up and he's like, "Sir, you forgot your clock." And the guy's like, "Ah, don't bring me my clock." And then Porky Pig proceeds to chase him all over the city with his like bomb clock. And the anarchist keeps trying to get away. And then the police get involved. And it's a whole to-do. And Porky Pig ends up blowing up the anarchist when no one else could catch him, and he gets rewarded with like a whole bunch of money, and then he buys soda drinks with all of his money.
And what's that have to do with Thomas Pynchon's The Crying of Lot 49, Derry?
Well, this fellow, Mr. Thoth, mixed up this story with his memory of his grandfather. So he had this like whole narrative going on where like his grandpa, he describes him, as a quote unquote Indian killer. So yeah. And says that his grandpa was like attacked by these folks wearing black feathers who actually weren't Indians, or he didn't think they were because they attacked at night. Because according to like tropes in like Western movies, Native Americans don't attack at night. Anyways, but he's recounting this story, and in his head, it's all like mixed up with the Porky Pig narrative that I just told. That's all.
Which I do think dovetails kind of nicely with the Platonic stuff that I was talking about earlier, in the sense that like he's kind of vaguely reminded of these things, but also he is retelling a story that he heard from someone else. So there like is absolutely no memory going on at this point. No one has any authentic memory of anything. He's mixed up some communiques he got from his grandfather with some communiques he got from, you know, the television or the movie theater.
Oedipa later describes this as being like a long white hair over a century long, all these fatigued brain cells between herself and the truth. So I think she also recognizes that this is like a sort of secondhand story told by an old man to a young man who's now an old man who's mixed it up with a Porky Pig cartoon.
Yeah. But it does some important work of, I guess, connecting the, like we've encountered the Tristero conspiracy, I guess, at this point in text and in like a sort of fictionalized telling of like the context of a play. And so this, I guess, brings it slightly closer into the real world, in that it is being told as something that happened to a person that this person knew, and also connects it with a through line of like American imperialism, westward expansion, sort of xenophobic views of Native Americans, which reminded me a little bit of the play in the V in Love chapter, which in that book was described as being like somehow inspired by like massacre in out west in America's expansion.
Which play?
Oh, right.
The Rape of the Chinese Virgins play. They talk about how they like transposed it into ancient China, but like the incident that it was inspired by happened in America.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like Pynchon is often referencing Westerns.
Yeah. And westward expansion. I guess we'll, get some more of that in Mason and Dixon.
Yeah, the only other thing to note about this story is that he mentions that the feathers that were being worn by these individuals were, I'll just read the quote here, quote, "But those false Indians were supposed to burn bones and stir the bone black with their feathers to get them black. So the feathers were made black via bones," which calls back to, was it the cigarette filters that were made using bones?
And also the ink in the play for the letter.
Yeah, the ink that was used for writing in the play.
And then Mr. Thoth also has a signet ring that has the WASTE symbol on it. to really, I guess, nail it home that this like exists, I guess, with the plaque.
Yeah.
As like I guess, and this.
There's a physical connection between these two things.
It is here. Like, it did happen.
And the signet ring was supposedly cut off of the finger of one of the figures in black.
Yeah. And what Oedipa is here calling the waste symbol, or WASTE symbol.
WASTE.
Is the muted post horn.
And then she gets spooked by the sunlight again.
Yeah, that's right here. Quote, spooked at the sunlight pouring in all the windows.
As if she'd been trapped at the center of some intricate crystal. That reminds me of some mucho stuff for later.
At this point, do we get to Genghis Khan? Is that the next major?
He goes to visit Fallopian
now we flash
again.
back. Yeah, this
now
is
we're
the end of the flashback. We're back in the scope with Fallopian again.
Yep.
And then she goes to visit Genghis Khan. We go back to the scope for like 25 words, and then we're with Genghis Khan, who was not ripped off from that guy.
Absolutely not. So Genghis Khan is a philatelist, like stamp expert.
I had to look up that word on my second read.
What I will say is, during our recent Q&A, I pitched the plot against America as being good, sort of Pynchon-esque. There's a lot of stamp collecting. There's a stamp on the cover of that book too.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, I really made a good pitch, and I didn't realize that at the time how good it was.
A male word I learned in relation to this was, I guess maybe this is a more common word than I realized, but I didn't know what mail cancellation was.
Really?
Just as like, what does it mean to cancel mail?
You've never gotten something hand canceled?
No.
You didn't. I guess you didn't go with us to mail our wedding invitations.
No, I didn't know. I didn't.
Wait,
in point of fact.
Explain this.
Yeah, Dury, what's cancellation?
What happened with your wedding invitations?
I was just like, oh, I guess that's when like mail gets returned to sender because it's canceled. It's not sent. That's not what cancellation is.
That's not what it means. It's like the stamp that gets put on the mail at the post office. You know, when you get like, you have your stamp and then there's like a post office stamp on top of it. Different type of stamp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm realizing there aren't two different words for that. Stamp on the paper,
you have an adhesive stamp on the envelope.
And then you put a sticker on, but then the post office puts like an ink stamp on top of the sticker. Yeah, and that's usually done by a machine. And so if you have a letter that shouldn't be smushed, that you like maybe paid a lot for stationery, or it's on like a special sheet of paper, or you have something thick and you don't want it smushed by the machine, you can go to the post office and ask them if they would hand cancel something for you, which means that they hand stamp it.
And so the reason for this is so that you can't reuse the stamp that you bought. You can't peel it off and reuse it because they have put ink on top of it.
I've never. That makes so much sense.
It makes so much sense.
I felt so that they've devalued the stamp.
Yes.
Huh. Wow.
I felt like an idiot reading about this. I was like, suddenly things are making a lot more sense. And there's also in the stamp appraisal and collecting community, there's a lot of back and forth. Like some stamps are more valuable if they have been canceled, if they've been canceled at like a certain post office at a certain period of time, or some stamps are much more valuable if they've never been used, of course. There's varieties
of freaks.
There's varieties of cancellation that, you know, are as simple as like scribbling over the stamp to like having designs on the cancellation stamp that like don't cover the image of the king's head or something. So you're not like stamping over an icon. Anyways, there's a lot all about cancellation, and there's a lot about cancellation and stamp evaluation in this section of the book.
Indeed.
Because Pierce's stamp collection has a bunch of weird cancellations and forged stamps, you can also forge cancellations. That's another thing that happens in the collecting community.
And Genghis Khan is a expert in all of this. He's described as having a touch of summer flu. His fly was half open, and he was wearing a Barry Goldwater sweatshirt. I had to look up who Barry Goldwater was. He was a U.S. senator who later ran for president as a Republican and lost big to LBJ.
Yep. Isn't he like one of the reasons LBJ won that election?
I think he is the reason. Given that he lost.
Yeah, I was wondering, Dury, if you were going to hit us with like a AP US history thing, or if you would just hit signing us up with when you get destroyed in the election.
I never made it this far in U.S. history. We like always petered out like at World War II. Yeah.
Jesus, you can really tell when we're recording an evening Pynchon Pals compared to a morning one. No, I was thinking of like some other election where like someone ran like as an independent or something and lost.
Are you thinking of the 2000 election?
I'm not thinking of the 2000 election. Forget it. It's not Barry Goldwater. I don't know. I don't know what I'm thinking about. It's fine.
And he had just lost before like this book took place, I think, if I recall, if I've got my timeline right.
Right. That seems like it would check out.
Makes sense.
But the forgeries and the cancellations on these are all like weird little things that are kind of, the forgeries don't seem to be like they're trying to trick anyone necessarily. Like if you're looking for it, you will find these weird little alterations, including these little muted post horns, or like they change the figure that's on top of the U.S. Capitol building. What else? What are some of the other weird examples here? It goes on for a little bit, including some from the Pony Express, or like commemorative Pony Express stamps. But this is where Cohen reveals to Oedipa that the Tlön and Taxis family used the post horn as its symbol, which means that there's a mute jammed into the Tlön and Taxis symbol.
Which is a device used to make a horn quieter for the non-musicians out there.
Well, it's what Andrew said in the last episode. That it's the thing that you use in front of a horn to go like wah, 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 wah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, the post horn was used to signal the arrival of a mail carrier. And I forget if we mentioned this in our last episode, but Tlön and Taxis was a real post carrier in Europe, sort of owned by a wealthy family in whatever version of Germany was around at the time.
Yes, although it did not exist. Like Pynchon makes up a kind of much earlier history of the Tlön and Taxis family here, saying that it started in like the 1300s or something, which it did not.
There's a lot of
that
other
we
stuff
know about.
That we know about. There's a lot of other stuff going on in this passage beyond the stamp conversation. I feel like they're drinking dandelion wine, and I guess, I don't know if the Oedipa asks this, but Genghis volunteers that this information about where the wine came from. He said, I picked the dandelions in a cemetery 2 years ago. Now the cemetery is gone. They took it out for the East San Narciso Freeway. And I feel like this is the beginning of like a running theme, or maybe not the beginning, a continuation of a running theme of like kind of the changing landscapes of America and like the impact of the freeway on cities and suburbs. And it sort of spurs this whole reflection that Oedipa has on sort of her mission here. I might just read a couple excerpts from this passage. She says, she could at this stage of things recognize signals like that, as the epileptic is said to, an odor, a color, pure piercing grace note announcing his seizure. Afterward, it is only this signal really draws the secular announcement, and never what is revealed during the attack that he remembers. Oedipa wondered whether, at the end of this, if it were supposed to end, she too might not be left with only compiled memories of clues, announcements, intimations, but never the central truth itself, which must somehow each time be too bright for her memory to hold, which must always blaze out, destroying its own message irreversibly, leaving an overexposed blank when the ordinary world came back. And I feel like once again we have a little bit of like the fear of light, but also this really reminded me of our friend Stencil from V, of how he went through this whole like mission and mystery and was left at the end with sort of only compiled memories of clues and never the central truth itself.
Yeah, I hadn't really connected this sort of like repeated image of like sort of piercing bright light, and pierce maybe is a word that is intentionally used here, like this piercing bright light that brings upon these Pynchon is comparing this like to epilepsy or having a kind of
a seizure,
and also kind of like a seizure of paranoia. Yeah, I hadn't connected those two things, but I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, and there's a little something going on with memory as well. I think connecting back to what you brought up about the old man and Thoth, and his memory being spotty. And there's something going on here too, where like Oedipa's like, well, when you recognize something, then like she has a seizure, but then she might not remember the actual like information that's revealed. She'll only remember the signal of the information.
And the dandelion wine, Genghis Cohen says, remembers the changing of the seasons. He says that it's clearer now, he said, talking about the wine, rather formal. A few months ago, it got quite cloudy. You see, in spring, when the dandelions begin to bloom again, the wine goes through a fermentation as if they remembered. So like even these like chemically changed dandelions, he seems to say, like remember a certain state of themselves from before they were modified, which also feels kind of entropic. And then Oedipa thinks like it's not as if they remember, it's as if they like still exist, as if the cemetery wasn't paved over, as if they were still facing the sun, but they're gone at this point.
Yeah, I thought that was really beautiful passageway, and it's just an interesting reflection on like this cemetery being paved over, like whose bones were paved over, like were they moved? Are they still there under the freeway?
We talked, I think in chapter, it might be at the beginning of chapter 3, but they talk about, before we find out that the bones for the cigarettes are from the war in Italy, it talks about how a lot of the bones are being collected and sold by construction workers who are digging up graveyards for things. And we sort of get that thrown in. And so this is, I guess, somewhat a reference back to that, although it doesn't feel like it ties at this point back into the story in a larger way.
Yeah, we have bones
Trastero
throughout.
Mystery.
Shall we take a break at this point before we continue on into chapter 5?
Did we want to hit briefly on the Potsmaster,
Postage.
Yes. So the cancellation of Mucho's letter,
which I had to go back and look at, but
which
sent
I
Oedipa
also
a
had to
letter,
go back
remember?
and look at. Yeah. Back when they were sending letters to each other, Oedipa's been gone for a few weeks, and this was where she was like, oh, do I like mention in one of these letters that I'm sleeping with Metzger? No, he probably assumes that already, and like I assume he's sleeping with teenagers, etc., etc. Mucho's letter was canceled with a stamp that says, to the left of the cancellation, a blurb put on by the government, report all obscene mail to your potsmaster. And she asks Metzger at the time, what's a potsmaster? And Metzger says, guy in the scullery, replied Metzger authoritatively from the bathroom, in charge of all the heavy stuff, canner, kettles, gunboats, Dutch ovens.
And then with Genghis Cohen, he points out that in addition to all of these stamps having little sort of like oddities engraved on them that are divergent from the original stamp or the replica of the original stamp, one of them even has a transposition. It says U.S. Potsage. And Oedipa's like, Potsage? Potsmaster?
Indeed. We'll get answers to that, I'm sure, in the next chapter.
Yeah. It'll all be clear as mud.
Which we'll get to right after this break.
Sit down, weary traveler, I
Hi, Andrew. Feeling ready? Re-energized?
Let's do it, dude. I'm excited. We're going Berkeley, going San Fran, going Kinneret.
Yeah, I haven't been to San Francisco in a while. It's a nice throwback. I went there a lot in grad school.
Shout out to Lil B. Shout out to Berkeley.
This would be a much easier Pynchon Pals road trip to take if we just drove up and down like Highway 10.
Yeah.
Or
One.
yeah, Highway 5. Highway 10 is yeah. One, I don't know.
Isn't it one?
One would be, isn't that the like Pacific Coast Highway? Wouldn't it be one? I think 5 is the one that's like the 95 of the West Coast. That's like the one for hauling. The one for lollying and the one for hauling.
Welcome back to Pynchon Pals.
I'm going to vote that for our spinoff pod, we do a Steinbeck book. Take a different type of trip through California.
That's a good idea.
That comment there is going to make no sense to the people who just welcomed back to Pynchon Pals.
Welcome back to Pynchon Pals. We're on a road trip through California.
Just doing some road trip planning. That means I got to once again include the whole little bit beforehand.
It's a soft open.
Soft open.
Every time I try to pick a solid spot, I'm like, clearly we're done with that conversation. It's time to make a clean break and jump back into the episode. But no, always finds its way in.
What is the podcast going to be too long, Patrick? Are you concerned the episode's going to be too long?
No, I just like to have sort of like a gentle return. I guess that's the most gentle return. Anyways, welcome back. Glad you could make it. Hope you've also got a nice cup of tea or some other beverage
or an apricot.
Tend yourself, or an apricot, whatever you want. You all want a chapter summary for chapter 5?
Yes, please.
It's a long one. Gotta clear my throat. Oedipa really spirals. She drives north and checks in at a hotel hosting a convention for the California deaf community. Retrieving the hardback from the publisher's warehouse, she is distraught to find the Trastero mention missing completely, referenced only in footnotes as one variant among many. Her pursuit of the UC Berkeley English professor behind the book gets her nowhere since he's now teaching in San Narciso. The Berkeley campus and its free-spirited, outwardly left-wing students make Oedipa feel alienated. Her meeting with Nefastus is similarly unproductive. He sits her down in front of a few motionless pistons, affixed with a picture of Clerk Maxwell, and tells her to focus on separating molecules, entropy and thermodynamics and communication he reckons being identical. When he makes a pass at her, she flees. Stuck on the Bayh Bridge during rush hour, Oedipa pieces together the clues she has and resolves to spend the night adrift. She falls in with a gay bar hopping tour group, gets drunk with a man who claims to be a recovering love addict, and soon hits the streets alone. She meets a creepy gathering of children in Golden Gate Park, a Mexican anarchist she and Pierce ran into years ago, and an old sailor suffering from withdrawal whom she escorts back to a boarding room where she's sure he'll die. All the while, post horns abound, showing up on gang jackets, bus seats, and laundromat bulletin boards. She begins to develop a theory about an underground/underclass excluded and withdrawn from the workings of normative society. After dancing the night away with the deaf convention goers, she returns to Kinneret for a session with Dr. Hilarious, who she finds barricaded in his office, certain that Israeli special forces are inbound to extradite him for his research at Buchenwald. Mucho arrives on the scene to cover the police raid for KCUF, and Oedipa soon realizes her husband has been taking part in Hilarious's LSD trials himself, now convinced he can hear frequencies spanning human history.
Well, that pretty much sums it up.
Remind me, after we're done recording, I've got a very funny story to tell you too, but it's an off-pod only story. Sorry, I'll tell the listener. If you ever run into me in person, I'll tell you, but it's not for the pod.
At the first Pynchon Pals meetup.
Exactly.
God, I always hate it when podcast hosts say stuff like that on the podcast. Sorry about it, though.
I hate when you ever had the podcast host will be like, they'll still say it and then it just gets bleeped. That's way worse.
That is way worse. Yeah, we will stop recording for you to say it. Don't worry. But if you ever meet an Andrew Tillett, Just ask him. Tell him Kirby sent you.
God, oh, can you imagine if you're just like, somewhere in the world and someone comes up to you and says, Kirby sent me? God. Terrifying.
Did anyone else notice that Tristero has been spelled in 2 different ways?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. I think there's like the version that's like in the play is spelled with a Y, and I think the version that we see introduced separately that is not the play is with the I.
Okay. I was trying to figure that out.
So we start out with Oedipa driving north to Berkeley.
Yep. She decides not to visit Mucho. Or maybe she decided that earlier.
She is thinking about it. By the time she comes to a conclusion, she's just past the exit.
This feels like once again, like there's a really good sense of the like mind numbingness of the American interstate sprawl across this book, where it's just like, before you know it, you're just like, you're too far to do the thing you wanted to do 3 exits ago because you like missed the exit or something.
Yeah, and she has a really good like thinking period on the freeway a little bit later in this chapter, and she's like, it was like she's never thought more clearly than when she was in freeway traffic, and I get that. I feel like I do some good thinking when I'm sitting in traffic. She's staying in a German Baroque hotel, which again is quote unquote alarmingly bright.
Yeah, this part of the book also reminds me of a certain book by Vladimir Nabokov called Lolita, where the second half of that book is sort of like a road trip across weird hotels and motels. This, I think, would fit in well with that. There's a Remedios... Sorry?
I was going to say the second half of Laughter in the Dark is also all road trip.
Nabokov loved a road trip. This is a true fact. Also, he didn't drive, so his wife Vera did all of the driving.
I bet you love road trips when your wife Vera is taking you everywhere.
Nabokov was the ultimate passenger princess and like wrote Lolita while he was like listening to the radio on like butterfly hunting trips with his wife driving. This is a true fact.
That's very funny.
Yep. Yeah, she goes to Lectern Press. And they're like, we don't have it here, but you could go to the warehouse. So she goes to the warehouse and is dismayed to find that the line as written in this version is, "No hallowed skein of stars can ward I trow, who once has crossed the lusts of Angelo." No mention of Tristero. And there's like a lengthy footnote about a Whitechapel version circa 1670, this Trist or odious awry o Nicolo, it says. And then there's a commenter in that reference in that book that says that Trist or o dies awry could sound like Tristero dies irae, meaning like day of wrath in Latin. The day of Tristero's wrath, presumably.
Yeah, I got kind of lost in all this, even on my second read.
Basically, it's just like the trail kind of goes nowhere because like now there's a different version of this manuscript that doesn't seem to be reproduced anywhere.
Where was the trail heading originally? It was just that it like mentioned Tristero, and so she was interested in it.
It's that it mentioned Tristero, and she wanted to track down the original book, but then that book said that there was a variant in a different... There's a variant version, and then she gets this and finds the variant version, but then it mentions a different variant version from a different manuscript that doesn't seem to be reproduced anywhere in like modern print. And I guess she's not going to Whitechapel,
And what
England.
did she think she might find in the original book? Or was she just...
There was a handwritten note, in the used book that she bought that she was trying to track down.
I don't think she's like looking for something specific. It's just that like she sees like someone, there's like a directional indication of like, you could look over here. Maybe there's something over here. I described this book to you when you were doing some of your rereading as like, it's a little bit of a mystery novel in search of a mystery. Like Oedipa is kind of she's trying to find the mystery that she's looking for. but she like doesn't have even all of the pieces or all the vocabulary to understand what the question is she's trying to ask.
Yeah.
And so she's like just following up on whatever is in front of her.
I think you were about to say earlier, Patrick, but didn't, that the hotel room she's staying in has a reproduction of a Remedios Varo in it.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah. Good memory.
Yeah.
It does.
Want to make sure we didn't miss that. Didn't say which Remedios Varo.
J. Cary Grant has a hypothesis on that.
What does he think?
Oh.
Yeah, let's turn to JKG. He writes, Cowart surmises that the painting is possibly Varo's Encuentro, in which, quote, a woman opens one of a number of small caskets in a room only to find her own face staring back at her.
Oh, horrifying.
He notes that the reference to Varo is a reminder for Oedipa that everything she, quote unquote, discovers may be the product of her own imaginative weaving.
I guess that reflects the dream she has immediately after, where she's like really freaked out by herself in the mirror.
Yeah, I think that's probably where Cowart gets this from.
Terrifying painting
It
to
is
have.
really scary.
This is not your horses running in a field you see at the Marriott.
It's on display in Scotland.
Spooky hotel.
So if you're nearby, go see it for us.
He wants to find the professor who did the editing for this edition of this book of plays, but he now works at the San Narciso College, so she has driven all the way upstate for nothing.
Yeah, so she's on the Berkeley campus, and it's really in the throes of like, what does this book take place just like a few years before like the Summer of Love? It's like very much in the throes of activist sort of mid-60s hippie vibes at Berkeley, and Oedipa feels super out of place. She's like, it was another world when she was, in school. It says she moved through the campus carrying her fat book, attracted, unsure, a stranger, wanting to feel relevant, but knowing how much of a search among alternate universes it would take. And a little bit later on, she reflects, along another pattern of track, another string of decisions taken, switches closed, the faceless pointsmen who'd thrown them all now, all transferred, deserted, and stir, fleeing the skip tracers, out of their skull, on horse, alcoholic, fanatic, under aliases, dead, impossible to ever find again. Among them, they had managed to turn the young Oedipa into a rare creature indeed, unfit perhaps for marches and sit-ins, but just a whiz at pursuing strange words and Jacobean texts. Which was a funny line, but also like created this visual of sort of like a faceless men at like switchboards, sort of controlling your fate by choosing sort of which future or which universe you exist in, what decisions you make that then leads you to become who you are. And this idea that who Oedipa is has been sort of determined by all these sort of like switches that have been flipped leading up until now.
Flipped switches, and also like Republican senators, like by and large, where, she's like feels deeply estranged from all of this, like, oh, you're just like expressing like strong kind of like left-wing political opinions, just sort of like openly and outwardly here. And that's not how we did it back at my old school, Miss Frizzle. At my old school, we never had student committees for, anti-war protests, free speech movements and all that.
Yeah, she keeps saying that she feels like she's in another world or like an alternate universe.
Walking, what is it like Dury as a professor walking around campus? Because I know the few times I've been back on university campuses, it is very jarring, but I guess you guys both do that significantly more regularly than the average person as like an adult walking around a college campus.
It's a constant reminder of your own mortality.
Yeah, I do get like reminded on an annual basis that like each year I am older than I was when I was in college, and it's very visceral.
Yeah, you know that Matthew McConaughey line
Yeah,
in,
I was just
in Dazed and Confused? There's another reading of that line that is significantly less sexually predatory, but does just remind you that like you're one step closer to the grave year after year.
I think it might depend a little on the campus, though, and like the level of activity going on. I don't want to throw Northwestern under the bus at all. And maybe it's because it's cold for a lot of like really cold for a lot of the winter.
People don't hang out in the quad, I'm
not
guessing,
so
in
much.
Northwestern for large portions of the year.
Not so much. It's definitely not Berkeley. I've been on Berkeley's campus, and it's much livelier.
Yeah, well, the Northwestern University Administration has increasingly big ideas about what you are and aren't allowed to do on the quad these days. So there's also that. It's one way to make you feel alienated, certainly.
I do get the feeling, though, of like feeling a little removed from time when you're around all these people who are sort of like existing in a particular space and a particular time, and they're like young and they're like in the moment, and then like you have kind of left and gone and lived your life and then like come back and you feel like removed from the moment.
When
I get that.
She's left, gone, like had several international adventures with this like very wealthy man, and like settled down in a suburb with a used car salesman turned radio DJ, and like now she goes to Tupperware parties. These kids aren't going to Tupperware parties.
No. They're probably protesting the Tupperware party.
Yeah.
They have to eat all of their food because they can't store their leftovers.
If only there was it's got to be a better way.
I think also, like, maybe this is another example of Oedipa walking into a place and expecting to be noticed, and finding herself in a place where no one is interested in her, and she feels super removed from the hubbub.
If only Oedipa could slackline, she'd get the attention she needed.
I don't know what that means.
You know those people.
You went to the University of North Carolina. You know what slacklining is.
You set up like the big string
It's like a
between two trees.
It's like a tightrope between two trees.
Yeah, it's like a tightrope for jackasses.
I never knew what those were called. Oh boy.
Well, now that we're sort of like done with our griping session about
riffing on universities.
Maybe if she had a pair of toe shoes.
Yeah. Oh, they just none of them were wearing shoes back in 66 or whatever.
That's more respectable than wearing a pair of toe shoes.
Yeah, no, it is.
I would much rather be barefoot.
So anyway, she can't find the professor. The professor is long gone. She then decides to head up and see John Nefastus, and is introduced to the Maxwell's Demon Machine. Now, Andrew, could you explain to us what Maxwell's Demon is? Can we run that back and see?
In case anyone missed it before the break.
Yeah, so the demon moves the hot particles to the hot side and the cold particles to the cold side. And the paradox is that it violates the second law of thermodynamics. But when you take the demon into the system, it probably doesn't.
Yep.
And then Oedipa's supposed to be doing the computation with her mind. So she's also part of the system. Or is she? I guess she's...
Nefastus lives at a pseudo-Mexican apartment house. There's some U.S. mailboxes outside.
He's an absolute creep.
Unused, I'm sure.
Yeah. He's an absolute creep, that's for sure.
He says, so he's like watching the TV, and it says he's watching a bunch of kids dancing some kind of a Watusi, which is another dance move from the 60s. I know in the last episode we learned about the reverse backstroke. The Watusi is another different dance move.
Famously parodied on the Batman TV series from the 60s as the Batusi. Interesting.
And the reverse backstroke came up when Mucho was being a creep and watching like 17-year-olds dance.
Yeah,
and this
it's
Nefastus...
these kids with their dance trends.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, Nefastus is watching this TV program and likes watching the like young girls dance. And Oedipa, who I feel like in all of these situations where she encounters men, just uses like various different feminine wiles to try to get information from them. Like in one of them, it says that she tried to take on sort of a granddaughterly persona. In another one, it says that she like immediately started mothering. In this one, I guess she's trying to sort of relate and says, so does my husband, I understand, which is certainly one thing that you could say to a pedophile.
Well, but she is also communicating like, I am married. Don't get any funny ideas.
That part doesn't come across.
That did not come
John.
across to me.
He doesn't pick that one up.
No.
No, he doesn't pick that one up. Certainly not.
I felt like she was communicating more of a, it's fine if you like young girls. I get it.
She stares at Clerk Maxwell's face for a good long while and gets like kind of increasingly agitated.
We haven't mentioned that part once. The Nefastus machine just has a like a silhouette of Maxwell on the side. Like that's its whole thing.
Yep.
Got a little face.
And so Oedipa sits there and stares at it for quite some time. She thinks maybe she sees the piston move for a second, but then questions herself and sort of talks herself out of it.
I've got a question.
Yep.
So the demon is meant to be sort of filtering through all of these molecules in the box. And I feel like that mirrors how, especially in this chapter, but somewhat in the last couple of chapters, we're just getting like a wave upon a wave of these clues, and Oedipa is being forced to filter all of them out into like what is meaningful and what is not.
I think that's a really good connection.
I think that's good.
I have been trying to figure out what the meaning of this box is, and I like that. She's trying to find order in this like increasingly chaotic system, which also sounds like our good friend Herbert Stencil.
Well, and she's putting like Oedipa is putting in the work here, which is why she kind of has a note of incredulity in the last chapter when this machine is first being described to her, and she's like, sorting isn't work. Like, why isn't sorting work?
She's like, ask the post office.
Ask the post office if sorting is work. Ask the Tupperware host if sorting is work.
So yeah, anyway, she gives up on the box and decides that perhaps she will leave. And then Nefastus is like, well, let's sleep together first. And she's like, hell no. And sort of runs screaming from his apartment, which who could blame her?
Yeah, she does seem like genuinely kind of surprised by this turn of events when Nefastus says, we can, let's go do it on the couch. And she says, it, said Oedipa, do it? What? Have sexual intercourse, replied Nefastus. And he specifically wants to do it while the nightly news is on because he kind of gets off on global atrocities, specifically in the Far East.
Yeah, and then there's a very creepy, honestly, the exit scene is really creepy. So she says, gah, and then fled. You can choose what intonation that gah had, probably more of a sound of horror than I just made. And then it says Nefastus snapping his fingers through the dark rooms behind her in a hippy-dippy, oh, go ahead then, chick fashion. He had doubtless learned from watching the TV also, which just sounded extraordinarily creepy.
Yeah, this scene always gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Yes, it is like, yeah.
It's like, it's a real standout for me when like coming back to this book, I was like, oh, I don't like that scene with the weird guy in his house with the machine.
So she throws a scarf over her license plate, I guess, to disguise it, and then hits the freeway.
Hits the freeway, and then is promptly stopped on the freeway because she realizes that it's the middle of rush hour, and she has unfortunately locked herself into going across the Bay Bridge.
Yeah, and she seems not to realize that like San Francisco is as large of a city as Los Angeles, and is like quite surprised that there is a lot of traffic and like smog. She's like, can they have smog in San Francisco? So I felt like this was also maybe a little bit of either a reflection of Oedipa's unfamiliarity with San Francisco or like the changing landscape of California, that like maybe the city is bigger or more sprawly or there's more traffic than it was when she was last here.
And then we get, I guess, the closest thing that Pynchon really gives us in this book is like a catch up on what we know so far about things, like the Tlön and Taxis postal system, Tristero. There's an interesting line here where Oedipa thinking about Nefastus and how this thermodynamic and informational entropy he thinks resemble each other, not just because of coincidence. And Pynchon writes, yet he had made his mere coincidence respectable with the help of Maxwell's demon. And like this idea of making coincidence respectable, like justifying your coincidence.
Yeah, like he got a patent for his coincidence. She also reflects that like possibly the postal service or the like Tlön and Taxis, whatever this whole conspiracy is that she's circling around, is like a channel of communication for those of, quote, unorthodox sexual persuasion, inventors who believed in the reality of Maxwell's demon, possibly her own husband, Mucho Mas. So she's beginning to think that like certain people communicate through this postal service.
Well, these are specifically the people she has encountered, which she's encountered Mucho, obviously, with the Potts Master cancellation. She's encountered Nefastus and Kotex, and then on the bathroom wall about Kirby, it says like, hey, if you want to bring your wife along too, like we can all have a good time.
Yeah, so her like running hypothesis is that maybe it's a method for people with certain sexual proclivities to communicate with each other.
Just like connecting fringes, weirdos, outsiders.
We build on that later.
Yeah. But what she decides to do is like pull over, park the car on a steep side street among warehouses.
Aren't they all steep in San Francisco?
Yeah, very San Francisco.
And then just kind of like hits
Hope
the
she has a
town.
parking brake.
This is the Benny Profane energy, which is just like, I'm just going to get out and see what happens.
She really pulls a Benny Profane here because she also becomes kind of a voyeur for the whole night. And is doing a lot of like watching and lurking. And I feel like really, really, really switches from her stencil energy to her Benny energy for a little bit.
She gets sort of encompassed in a tour group who are going nightlife hopping, and they've sort of got. She gets the name tag from a guy named Arnold Snarb, who is deciding to
love that name.
It's the funniest name.
Snarb
is deciding to ditch the tour, and they go into this gay club called the Greek Way. And their tour guide is sort of like, okay, everyone circle around. We're all going to have 2 drinks here at the Greek Way, and then we're going to keep it moving.
They're going to keep moving to Finocchio's, which is a real world, like famous San Francisco gay bar. So Thomas Pynchon did his research here.
Yeah, she meets a guy. Do you know what his name is? Have I forgotten his name? She meets someone.
I don't think he ever tells her his name.
Yeah.
Anonymous man.
Before we move past it, regarding Arnold Snarb and the name tag that reads, "Hi, my name is Arnold Snarb, and I'm looking for a good time." There's just an insane metaphor here where Thomas Pynchon, who was in the Navy, of course, writes that she found a name tag, quote, being deftly pinned outboard of one breast. And I just like the use of the word outboard there as like a nautical term on the hull of the ship, the grand ship that is Oedipa. We can continue talking about the Greek Way now.
Yeah. So she notices that this guy has the muted horn on a pin that he's wearing on his lapel, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's where you wear a pin. And she goes up to him and says, "What if I told you that I was an agent of Tlön and Taxis?" So she's not learned her lesson at all about just approaching people and saying cryptic sentences.
Talking in proper nouns. We're right back in it.
which he asks her how she got named Arnold Snarb.
Great response.
Yeah, this scene I do feel like has that kind of like screwball comedy energy of like, how'd you get the name Arnold Snarb?
She then, sort of following up on, I guess, her current theory about WASTE, clarifies that if it's a homosexual sign or something, it doesn't bother her. And he does not know what she's talking about or at all.
And she also says, this line really got me. She goes, "Look, you have to help me. I use the U.S. mail because I was never taught any different, but I'm not your enemy. I don't want to be."
Yeah, I mean, I do think all of this, like, it has such a, like, overwhelmed young Republican faced with, like, a lot of new information type energy. It's like, it's really endearing to a certain degree of, you know, she was never taught any different. That, like, as far as she's grown up her whole life, like, it's the U.S. mail. That's the mail. Whatever,
he just so
whatever
desperately
is,
wants to send something WASTE.
whatever
and she can't.
scrawled on, like, you know, dirty bathroom walls, like, it's none of my business. But, like, suddenly she starts worrying, like, what if it is her business? And she's, like, not prepared to confront this possibility.
What if she owns this business now?
What if, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
what if she is
owns
the executor?
WASTE?
She's the executor of whatever business this is. He points out that Kirby is a code name for all manner of clandestine sexual activity.
And then reveals that he's a member of the IA, the Innamorati Anonymous. An innamorato is someone in love. That's the worst addiction of all.
Thanks, Thomas, for telling us what inamorato means. Didn't he do that one time in V, that there's just like randomly one time that he explains what a weird word was?
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
He didn't explain what adenoidal was or what was the stamp collector word, a philatelist. We didn't explain
He
that.
kind of glossed that because he said he was a philatelist was called in to help with the stamps. So he didn't say it explicitly, but he kind of lets you know. Yeah, so this guy, boy, Oedipa's got another guy explaining things to her and telling a story to her.
Real signpost story.
And what a story this is.
What a story this is. There was a Yo-Yo-Dine executive who was put out of the job by computers. And
Specifically the IBM 7094.
yeah. Is that a real computer? I didn't look up the IBM 7094.
Gotta be right. There's things at this point with Thomas where I just it's too specific to have been made up. I'm like, this, he wouldn't have given it. It's the junior mints of novels.
Yeah, there's a Reddit thread
computer.
on r/vintage computers that's asking questions about it.
It was first installed in September 1962.
So this is recent.
Yeah.
Like, the Innamorati Anonymous is not like, this didn't happen in like the 50s.
It's a months-old organization.
Okay. So anyways, he's put out of the job by this computer because he is somewhere in the corporate root system above supervisor but below vice president. And he decides to, potentially using one of Pynchon's pet phrases, I guess, at this point, take a Brody, referring to the famous bridge jumper that we first heard about in V.
He was, in fact, contemplating jumping off of this stack into rush hour traffic, which I looked up. It's a 4-level freeway interchange in LA.
Yep. J. Cary Grant has the same thing. Although he also finds that some people think it refers to like one of the record company buildings out in San Francisco, but because like some commentators have said that must be what is being referred to here, but it seems that J. Cary Grant hit the boots on the ground, and there's a line that's like, no one who works in that building has ever heard of it being called the Stack. I checked.
I just feel like there's so much freeway commentary in this book that I feel like it makes most sense for it to be the freeway. It took me a while to find because there's a bunch of new buildings in various places called the Stack that obviously are not this building because they've been built since this book was written.
Din's also in LA. He's not going to drive to a San Francisco record company.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I said San Francisco. I meant he's in LA.
Wow,
yeah,
okay.
You're right.
Yeah, okay. That makes...
Yeah, the record company, whatever it is also in LA. He's inspired by the monk who self-immolated as a protest in an AP Wire photo that he sees.
But what about the letters he received?
Yeah, what is... I'm trying to...
He puts out he buys advertising in the newspaper basically to ask
for suicide letters, right? He wants to ask for examples of people. He's trying to decide if he should commit suicide. Can't make up his mind. And is like soliciting like advice from other people who have attempted suicide. And he doesn't expect to get anything because he figures they're all dead.
He figures most of them were successful.
Yeah. But then actually one day a bum delivers to his door a bundle of letters from failed suicide.
Not via the U.S. mail.
Not via the U.S. mail.
And then at the same time, his wife has started sleeping with the computer technician.
Yeah.
Yeah, who replaced his job.
When he comes by, the computer technician is like, you're upset that you got laid off for not being efficient. It's taken you a week to decide if you're going to commit suicide or not. Yeah,
and there's this sort of darkly funny scene where he's like doused himself in gasoline. He's about to light himself on fire. He's starting to reflect, like he's about to light himself on fire with his quote-unquote faithful Zippo, which had seen him through the Normandy hedgerows, the Ardennes, Germany, and post-war America. So he's been through the war. And then suddenly his wife and this man come in and they have sex in the other room. And then they hear something. And then they come in the room and see him doused in gasoline, about to light himself on fire. And they're both standing there naked. And then they have this conversation about the IBM 7094. So
yeah,
dark scene, but also like a little comical if you picture it.
Which the quote-unquote efficiency expert says that it would have taken the IBM 7094 12 microseconds to decide to commit suicide, whereas it took this fellow 3 weeks. But then he realizes that the stamps on some of his letters got weird when they got hit with the gasoline.
And he sees the postal horn.
He sees the postal horn. The muted postal horn.
And then he decides that his big problem all along was falling in love.
So he founds an Emirati Anonymous.
Which basically is this society of people that like they've sworn to not love anymore. And they have like, if they need support in not having relationships, they like have a meeting with someone, but they never meet with the same person again because they're supposed to be isolated. And they communicate again through this waste system, WASTE.
Yeah. Although they don't really, they're not like in charge of this system necessarily, but they do make use of some portion of it. At which point Oedipa starts meditating on love and eroticism. And there's a funny bit where Pynchon writes, Oedipa sat feeling as alone as she ever had, now the only woman she saw in a room full of drunken male homosexuals. Story of my life, she thought. And then a little ways down, despair came over her, as it will when nobody around has any sexual relevance to you.
I think that sums Oedipa up pretty well.
Once again, not the center of attention.
Not the center of attention in this gay bar. So she leaves, and in like a really, I think this sentence really like sets the tone for the rest of this chapter, which is that she entered the city again, the infected city.
Yeah, and then we have sort of like a Fopple level fever dream
Yeah.
that Oedipa goes through.
Oedipa's story. So she's all night finding these images of the Tristero, the muted post horn. There's in a dark window of an herbalist in Chinatown. She thinks she sees it among the Chinese characters. There's on a sidewalk,
Like a hopscotch
kind of game. She's like copying things into her memo book.
She can't figure out what's real or what she's dreaming.
She has at a certain point, she thinks like, it is a little odd and maybe kind of dangerous for me to just be like wandering around these like dimly lit back streets in, as far as she knows and is concerned, like not the best of neighborhoods
In San Francisco.
Night. Yeah.
But then she decides that she's safe because of this like mission that she's on, and thinks that the fact that she's seeing these symbols repeating means that like she was meant to remember and therefore like won't be hurt.
Yeah, she's like inside and outside the city's conspiracy. She's like, she's reading it all. It can't touch her.
She runs into these creepy children in Golden Gate Park who...
Creepiest kids in the world.
Absolutely horrifying. Honestly, they reminded me of a Remedios Varo painting.
Yeah.
Not a specific one, but just like the vibes.
Tristo, 1, 2, 3, turning taxi from across the sea.
That genuinely creeped me out a little bit.
Glad I could.
All the kids say that they're dreaming, and that when they wake up in the morning, they're always so tired that they end up sleeping all day long because they're out in the park at night.
Yeah, when they dream, they meet up in the park at night, and they do this little hopscotch game with the post horn.
Ugh.
Yeah. It's weird.
They gave me the heebie-jeebies. And then she runs into an old lover, friend, compatriot.
Old enemy?
Yeah.
More or less.
Enemy of Pierce's.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't tell if they'd had a relationship before. I guess maybe not. Maybe she was with Pierce.
Yeah, this guy, Jesus Arrabal, who was an anarchist in the Congregación de los Insurgentes Anarquistas.
Yeah, the CIA, but not that CIA.
Yeah, a different CIA in Mazatlan when her and Pierce were on vacation.
And he's kind of jazzed to run into her because as far as he remembers, Pierce is like, he was like stunned meeting Pierce because Pierce in Veracity was like the prototypical, like Platonic ideal form of everything he stands against, where he's just like, this is it. This guy is the capitalist. This guy is like the Western imperialist.
And like Pierce's existence sort of like motivated Jesus in a way that like everyone else has sort of like dropped out of this like revolution at this point. And he's still going because he has this vision of like Pierce as like the ultimate ideal of what to destroy.
And so now he's in exile in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both sort of here together through the same like effect of Pierce.
I like Jesus Arrabal. If we're listing Pynchon characters from Lot 49 who I hope show up again in some context, I hope Jesus Arrabal shows up again.
I want there to be a fun get the whole gang together of side characters who are anarchist revolutionaries, and it could be this guy and the cocktail bartender
and the character from the Porky the Pig cartoon.
The Porky the Pig anarchist. The Gaucho is there.
What about Gudrulfi?
Gudrulfi was never involved in anything unless he was. I guess he was, in a certain sense, involved.
He definitely got involved, yeah.
He definitely sold trees to people.
Anyways, Oedipa does a little more reflecting on how she got here, kind of how Pierce, without Pierce, neither she nor Jesus would be exactly here, exactly now. I feel like it's more on this, like, what switches were flipped that caused her to take this path.
Yeah, and I think her conversation with Jesus also illuminates, like, this is a guy who kind of achieved the thing that she is looking for. Like, she has not met the thing that she is opposing. And she wants desperately to like have a form and a figuration of like the thing that she's trying to track down. And this guy like did have that in the form of Pierce Inverarity. And like maybe Pierce Inverarity is also the light at the end of the tunnel for Oedipa here a little bit, but I think she's a little jealous of like, now that is clarity. That is purpose, what you have. Me, I'm talking to children who may or may not be on drugs in the park.
And then she starts seeing the post horn truly everywhere. Continues to see the post horn everywhere.
We get another wave of just a list of random encounters.
Yeah, someone has written death instead of WASTE, standing for don't ever antagonize the horn. I also think a particularly interesting image that stood out to me is that she's in like a black neighborhood and like meditates briefly on the stark whiteness of the laundromat.
Of the fluorescent bulbs in the laundromat.
Yeah, well,
she does not like fluorescent bulbs.
The fluorescent bulbs in the laundromat, but also like laundromats, you want your sheets to get like clean and white. And there's like this association of like, I feel like Thomas Pynchon, and who could imagine why, has like, at least in V, associated like whiteness and that like white sickliness spreading with like imperialism and racism, and this association of Tristero with whiteness feels intentional here to me.
Yeah, I feel like there is a lot of this. I mean, I think it connects also. There's a lot of this contrast. Like she talks about the flash and the like exposure on like a camera, which would be like sort of a white black contrast. And there's also like even like the eyes of the character in the Porky Pig cartoon are like white contrasted against like an inky black background. And so there's a lot of this imagery of like white lights in the blackness.
Yeah. This book like does not outwardly have a lot to do with race thus far, but like, or at least maybe not as much as V did, but I do think it's in here in interesting sort of twisting pathways.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we have this like image of Oedipa, ostensibly a white woman from like a upper middle class,
college educated,
upper middle class, suburban lifestyle, young Republican. And she sort of wandered into like the depths of urban San Francisco and is sort of having a voyeur / I don't know what, like.
Well, I'm thinking back to the stuff about tourism in V with like she becomes a little bit of like the voyeur tourist.
Yeah, like she even joins up with a tourist group and is like, she's in gay bars, she's in black neighborhoods where she's probably never been before, and she's on the bus and she's under the bridge.
Esther who takes the bus in V and is like, God, imagine what depravities are going on just outside these thin bus windows.
Yeah, she goes into the park at night, like she's interacting with people who are drunk and high, and she's really seeing like the night in the city. The street. Yeah, this whole section stood out to me more, I think, having read V now than it did on my first reading. Who else does she meet here?
Does she get into? There's a woman on the bus listening to top 200 hits. There's a guy who plays is he playing poker? Yeah, plays poker. There's the Alameda County Death Cult who uses the WASTE system. I really loved this one. She somehow gets to the airport and overhears a mother reminding her son to write via WASTE because he's going to work at an aquarium in Florida.
Yeah, and he like thinks that the dolphins are going to like take over the world. And she's like, make sure to write by waste. The government will open it if you use... Yeah. The government will open it if you use the other. The dolphins will be mad.
Well, now, it's interesting because the CIA was getting into dolphin research back in the 60s. How did Thomas Pynchon know about this?
Because that YouTube comment I sent you the screenshot of.
Wait, you sent me a screenshot of a YouTube comment about dolphins?
Yes, I put it. Dury reacted to it in the Pynchon Pals planning chat.
I did not even see this.
Everyone, let's scroll back and watch Patrick's reaction in real time as he reads.
Should I read this out loud?
YouTube comment. Yeah, I think you should. Give this one a shout out.
At Mongolian Qwerty 123. I guess you can find Andrew's YouTube search history by finding this comment. A curiously overlooked aspect of Pynchon is the likelihood of his being a CIA media agent himself. His ties to the military, to intelligence, and to the occult hint at this, not to mention the heaps of praise and attention given his work by the major periodicals, despite their obscenity and inaccessibility. The man seems awfully well connected for being so famously reclusive. Yeah, this is kind of a long-running theory about Pynchon, is like how much, like, you're telling me this guy worked at Boeing for a little bit and then just kind of disappeared and won a bunch of like major book awards while seemingly gallivanting around North America.
Why not?
Or asset. He's got asset written all over him, and he knows about the dolphins. CIA dolphin experiments also come up in the William Gibson short story and Keanu Reeves film Johnny Mnemonic, where there's a psychic dolphin.
I was thinking of Johnny Tsunami,
no, not Johnny
Disney
Tsunami.
Channel original movie about the guy from Hawaii who becomes a snowboarder.
No, not him. Quote, so it went. Oedipa played the voyeur and listener.
And they keep listing people that Oedipa sort of encounters. I liked the aging night watchman nibbling at a bar of ivory soap who had trained his virtuoso stomach to accept also lotions, air fresheners, fabrics, tobaccos, and waxes in a hopeless attempt to assimilate it all the promise, productivity, betrayal, ulcers before it was too late. This reminded me of our friend, if anyone's listened to the new bonus episode, check out the Patreon. It reminded me of one of the characters in The Master who sort of assimilates a whole bunch of drinking substances and trains his stomach to drink like paint thinner.
Whose name I'm getting the impression you do not remember.
Don't call me out like that. I have a horrible memory for character name.
Freddie Quell.
Freddie.
Also, none of the substances are drinking substances. Very notably, not one of the things he drinks is meant for human consumption.
But they're drinkable.
Yeah.
Just like
They're all
ivory
liquids.
soap is edible. Do you want to eat it? No.
Sorry, Oedipal? That's something there. I'm only like half joking about edible and Oedipal being related here. Oedipa thinks of herself as a private eye who sooner or later has to get beat up on, quote unquote. And she starts to feel that like all of this information is the thing that is beating up on her.
Yeah, and she begins to develop this like loose theory that all these people that she's running into are sort of like alienated in some way from society, and that the post horn is like a symbol of this like underworld of the city. Yeah,
like a kind of like subaltern class that is either withdrawn intentionally or like otherwise excluded from the quote unquote the life of the Republic from its machinery, which is her best guess at this point about WASTE. At which point she
encounters a man.
Got out of a jitney, which is like a small little bus. I learned, new word. And encounters, where does she encounter this man? On the doorway on the stair leading up to
like a rooming house.
Rooming house, yeah.
Yeah.
And he is looking really rough, but has a tattoo of the post horn on the back of his left hand, and he asks her to mail a letter to his wife in Fresno. But she doesn't know what mailbox he's talking about.
They have kind of like a profound sort of moment of connection, I felt like.
It's a beautiful scene.
Where, like, I'm just like trying to like paint the picture here. Like we have this sort of like, I mean, Oedipa's also looking a little rough at this point. She's been wandering around the city all night, but we have this sort of like well-to-do woman, and she comes across this seemingly, I guess, not unhoused. He has a room in this rooming house, but man who's in a bad way, who's like in alcohol withdrawal. He's like sobbing. He clearly seems on like death's door. And she just like holds him, and he's sort of leaning against her and crying, and she's just repeating, I can't help. I can't help.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this whole meditation on the mattress that he sleeps on in the rooming house, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, to get up there, a different guy shows up and asks Oedipa to help him get this guy up to his room.
Yeah, but she actually like thinks about the mattress before she even gets up to the room. So it's all kind of like jumbled up a little bit. But she kind of reflects that like this is another one of Pynchon's very long sentences, but secret salts held all those years by the insatiable stuffing of a mattress that could keep vestiges of every nightmare sweat, helpless overflowing bladder, viciously, tearfully consummated wet dream, like the memory bank to a computer of the lost, is sort of how she's thinking about the mattress that he slept in. And later, when she reflects on the fact that the mattress might be burned, she's like really profoundly saddened by the idea that all of these lives and all of these memories that have been stored in the mattress are going to be gone forever.
Yeah, we're back to the dandelions. There's regrettably, I couldn't get out of my head, there's an episode of Rugrats, the cartoon.
Really?
Where I know. Bear with me.
At this beautiful passage, you're going to bring up Rugrats?
I'm extremely ashamed.
Rugrats is a beautiful cartoon.
I'm
It
extremely
is not.
ashamed to admit this, but there's an episode where the grandpa has to get a new mattress because his old mattress, I distinctly remember this image, has like formed like an impression of his body.
Yeah. Wow.
Like,
I remember this.
Could not get #90s kid. I like could not get that particular image out of my head as I was reading this, but it is a beautiful passage, just top to bottom. There's like, once again, we really get a kind of like Michelangelo's like Pietà, where there's this man who is like cradled in the arms of like a full grown adult man, cradled in the arms of this kind of like woman who is salvation. I feel like we saw that in V with Benny and Rachel at least once.
Yeah, she definitely has like a little bit of a savior fantasy moment where she kind of brings him up to his room, and she has this fantasy that maybe she would find the landlord of this like boarding house and bring him to court and buy the sailor, who's this man, a new suit at Ruse Atkins and shirt and shoes, and give him the bus fare to Fresno after all. But with a sigh, he had released her hand while she was so lost in the fantasy that she hadn't felt it go away, as if he'd known the best moment to let go. So she gets kind of so lost in this fantasy of being his sort of personal savior that she kind of loses the connection she has with him.
Yeah. The sailor then later calls her a bitch for handing him money when the guy he owed money to was still standing in the room.
Well, also she like has this whole fantasy of doing all these amazing things for him and then gives him $10.
Yeah.
She also delivers the letter.
She does. But it is a little, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here with like computers and memory and like physical inscription of memory.
Yeah.
And memory
It goes back to
registers.
It goes back to the entropy thing, right? Like this mattress stores so much information inside of it, and then if you get rid of it, like that is a destruction of the informational, or yeah, the informational entropy is being increased by destroying this mattress that is otherwise like storing so much info.
Yeah, and it brings us back, I think, also to that thread of like when she described the man's memory as like this long, white, tenuous thread, and is kind of distressed that like there are so many like fragmented brain cells between her and the truth, And then I think she's looking at this mattress and thinking of like all of the information that's being burnt when this mattress is burnt. She seems very frustrated by the fact that like information is destroyed and then you can never get it back again, or it's corrupted in some way. And so she doesn't have the full picture of what's going on because like people's minds are flawed, and like artifacts as like holders of memories are flawed and destroyed.
Which reminds me, just to jump back to a passage that reminding myself I wanted to mention a little back before, when she's like first stepping out into the night, she thinks to herself, I am meant to remember. Each clue that comes is supposed to have its own clarity, its fine chances for permanence. But then she wondered if the gem-like clues, quote unquote, were only some kind of compensation to make up for her having lost the direct epileptic word, the cry that might abolish the night. So like these words, these symbols, these clues, they're like, she realizes that like they're not the thing. That's the compensation for never being able to access the thing, which is beyond all of these words, which is beyond all of this symbolism. It's not contained in any kind of like remembered sense, and she can't get to it, is what she's afraid of.
And then she has a lot of thoughts about DT.
I like this section a lot.
Take it away, Patrick.
So DT, delirium tremens. You know, it's the symptom of alcohol withdrawal. But she also starts thinking of other things that these two symbols D and T can mean. And so she thinks about freshman calculus and the what do you call that?
Derivative?
The time derivative, yes. And she starts thinking about time differential, a vanishingly small instant in which change had to be confronted at last for what it was. And so she begins to realize that like there's a certain power to like puns and like similar or identical symbols that can mean a variety of different things. And specifically, these puns make her think of the figures of the saint, the clairvoyant, the true paranoid, the dreamer, all of whom, quote, act in the same special relevance to the word, or whatever it is the word is there buffering to protect us from. So like in the way that like each of these figures have an estranged relationship to like words and the meanings of words, they reveal that the word is like a medium that is between us and some other thing. And again, this is the like epileptic religiosity that she is kind of afraid of at the bottom of all of this. And she's just like meditating on puns and the, I guess, power of symbolism. Does that make sense? Made more sense in my head before I started talking.
I'm not sure it made 100% sense to me, but
it's connected. So they say the act of metaphor then was a thrust at truth and lie, depending on where you were, inside, safe, or outside, lost. Oedipa did not know where she was. And there's this relationship, trembling unfurrowed, she slipped sidewise, screeching back across the grooves of years, where she's comparing herself like a needle in a record groove, where like we go through our normal middle class normative lives that Oedipa has been living like inside those record grooves, and she feels when she sees like DT has a variety of different valences, and like there's this guy in his mattress, and like she slips out of that groove for a second and like lands in like a ungrooved, unfurrowed space where things are like laid bare. She's not living in the sort of linear singularity of time. There's like a lot going on here of metaphors, some of which may not entirely hang together based on J. Cary Grant, who cites like 5 different people, all of whom interpret this passage differently. But if you get something about like records having grooves and slipping outside of the groove, and one way to do that is through these weird recognitions of the insufficiency of language and symbols, I think you're on the right track. At least that's what I got.
that's more than I got out of 2 reads of this passage, so I appreciate it. She finds the WASTE mailbox
and sees the periods.
Yeah, and she descends under the street, a la Benny Profane, and sort of like is wandering around underneath the freeway with all the other people who are sort of underneath the freeway. And under the freeway, she finds a can with a swinging trapezoidal top, the kind you throw trash in, old and green, nearly 4 feet high. On the swinging part were hand-painted the initials WASTE. She sees the periods between the letters, and then she drops the letter in, and then she watches to see who comes and picks it up. And someone does indeed come to pick it up, sort of a bum, and then she follows him.
All around.
Yeah, all around. It's a wonder Oedipa's feet have not fallen off at this point. She says like she was glad that she had the foresight to wear flats. I got to be honest, if I was wandering around San Francisco for this long in my flats, I would have so many blisters and my feet would be so sore at this juncture.
But so this kid's like picking up and dropping off letters all over town, and eventually picks up and drops off some letters at John Nefastus's place. And she's like,
I've come full circle.
Here I am.
Yep. At this point, she goes home.
She goes to the hotel and I would immediately go up to my room and kick off those flats and fall asleep after the night that Oedipa has had. But she ends up getting sort of like pulled into a party in the grand ballroom and dancing in a dance floor that, now that I'm looking at it again, is reminding me of Entropy.
Yeah.
It says each couple on the floor danced whatever was in the fellow's head. Tango, two-step, bossa nova, slop. But how long, Oedipa thought, could it go on before collisions became a serious hindrance? There would have to be collisions. The only alternative was some unthinkable order of music, many rhythms, all keys at once, a choreography in which each couple meshed easy, predestined.
And of course, this is happening because she's realizing that, like, everyone on the dance floor is deaf. And so she doesn't understand how they're not running into each other. Obviously, deaf people these are somewhat ableist thoughts coming from Oedipa Maas here. Like, deaf people can enjoy music, and dancing. But she's like, I just don't understand how this is possible that they're not all running into each other.
But I do think there's something about like entropy and order going on there, and like finding order.
Well, I think actually this is where Thomas Pynchon is doing something really interesting, because like Oedipa doesn't understand this, but like Thomas Pynchon at like a higher level is like, yes, there is an order here. It's just that like Oedipa does not have access to that order.
Yeah, she doesn't have the information she needs to see it, just as she doesn't have the information she needs to see the order in her mystery.
Yeah. The people who come to this convention every year, or every 5 years or whatever, the deaf community know how the dance works. And like, there is an order there that they're capable of keeping up. But Oedipa doesn't see it.
Yeah, just as Oedipa seems like maybe not the most well-equipped to understand the postal service of the underworld. But she's trying.
Okay, we're in the home stretch here.
Home stretch. So Oedipa decides to go home to talk to Dr. Hilarious and hopefully get her mind cleared a little bit about what has happened. And that plan does not work out.
Specifically, she wants Dr. Hilarious to be like, you sound like you're going nuts. None of this is real. But he's actually talking about a different Israel.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Puns are kind of like our insight into the like stunning power of the universe outside of our conception of order.
Yeah, Dr. Hilarious, unfortunately, is a very bad person.
Yeah, he's an extremely bad guy.
One might even say worse than Schoenmacher, which is an award that I didn't know was on the table.
The worse than Schoenmacher award? The award we give to a character in every book who is worse than Schoenmacher?
Yeah, we have, who is it? We have Fopple wins the worse than Schoenmaker war. Because Schoenmaker's not the worst in
No,
V.
he's not. He's
even the worst
definitely
in
not
V.
even the worst in V. Yeah. It turns out Dr. Hilarious ran like medical experiments on Jewish people at Buchenwald in Nazi Germany.
When she gets there, he is shooting a rifle out of the window, and she runs up to the door and is let in by his assistant, whose last name is Blam, which is funny because that's the sound a gun makes.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't realize
that really
that
got
either.
me.
And yeah, Helga says that he's concerned that people are after him, and Oedipa suggests that she should go up and try to talk to him.
Yeah, what follows is another sort of like extremely dark screwball comedy scene where they're kind of yelling at each other from across the door, and Oedipa, who has had kind of a hell of a 36 hours at this point, is a little bit blasé about the whole thing. When she's shot at, her first instinct is like, that was a weird sound. Like, I think a bug just whizzed past my ear. And then she's like, I don't think that was a bug.
Well, then I thought she was being chased. And then, so she runs into the office, and then it turns out she was being shot at from the office.
Yeah.
The same time, you can slowly hear the police sirens getting louder, and Dr. Hilarious is very concerned that the local Kinneret police are Mossad agents who are here to extract him to stand trial, a la Eichmann.
And then slowly, through this conversation reveals sort of the depravities that he committed during the war. He says this really eerie thing. There is a face, Hilarious said, that I can make, one you haven't seen. No one in this country has. I have only made it once in my life, and perhaps today in Central Europe there still lives, in whatever vegetable ruin, the young man who saw it. He would be now about your age, hopelessly insane. His name was V. Which is I thought that was a really haunting description. And I don't know if it's just because we just recently rewatched a edit of this, Patrick, but it reminded me of Leland Palmer in Twin Peaks. And when he looks in the mirror and sees Bob.
Spoilers for Twin Peaks.
I think we're past the spoilers for Twin Peaks at this point.
First Twin Peaks reference in a while on the pod.
Yeah, that's true.
So glad we got that in.
Yeah, if the listener will recall, or the reader, that like the faces that we have encountered are like number 17, the Fu Manchu, where he like, as part of his psychotherapy practice, he like makes weird faces.
Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah, that's what this is.
That's what this is referring to.
This was his research at Buchenwald was on
making faces
making
in
faces
psychotherapy
that incapacitate people.
That's super eerie.
Yeah, but there's a face he's never used in practice, which is this one that is torture or makes you go insane. So he says.
So around that point, you began to suspect that Hilarious was involved in some bad stuff in Europe, and then he confirms that later when he says he was in Buchenwald.
At the whole time, he's like ranting about Freud, and once again, we get sort of Thomas Pynchon taking Freud to task through this character, I guess, where he's like, the problem with Freud is that like, if Freud was right, then like everything that went on in the Holocaust, like everything I was doing at Buchenwald would have been revealed to be like a nervous symptom, or at the base of it, all of the horrors would have been revealed to be childhood anxieties and fears. But in fact, they were real material horrors that happened that this guy is saying Freud does not, can't account for, no matter how much he tried to, play the good Freudian, which he says means he can't have been that bad of a Nazi because Freud was Jewish. And he's tried very hard to be a good Freudian.
Oedipa, meanwhile, is keeping a very cool head through all of this. And she's sort of like reporting into the police, and they're like, how's it going in this hostage? Because he kind of takes Oedipa hostage, and they're like, how's it going? And she's like, just Marv. I'll let you know if it's hopeless. And then like later on, they're trying to break in the door. And Oedipa's like, bust it down, and Hitler Hilarious here will foot the bill. So she's kind of like really leaned into her moment as a hostage. Doesn't seem scared by this situation at all.
She's finally the center of attention.
That's true.
To her whole night of not being that.
Yeah, she's mostly just sort of like miffed that he is not giving her what she wanted, which was she really wanted to be told that she was losing her mind. And instead he's losing his mind.
Yeah. Which he does not blame on the LSD.
No, he's never touched the stuff.
Yeah, he wouldn't touch the stuff. He wouldn't touch the stuff himself. That shit makes you go nuts.
But who did touch the stuff?
Our reporter on the scene, reporting from the KCUF mobile unit, Mucho Mas.
Did y'all realize, and I'm ashamed to admit that J. Cary Grant helped me with this, that KCUF is an anagram for fuck?
I didn't realize
Genius.
that.
I didn't either. But at one point, Grant is just like, in one of his classic puerile little puns. Mucho interviews one Mrs. Edna Mosh once they break in. And he says, she's like, Edna Mosh? And he's like, don't worry, it'll come out the right way on air. And like, we're right back in the sort of like communication entropy, like you have to say something wrong so it'll be perceived correctly on the other end of the transmission.
And his like buddy is like, oh, thank God you're back, Oedipa. He's losing his mind. And he says Mucho is a walking assembly of man, which was a really weird way to describe someone.
Calling him the brothers in, which in being, the sort of just like a stand-in for a number, just like some number of people, but
is it also like a Brothers Karamazov reference, like the Brothers K, the Brothers in?
Perhaps, yes.
Maybe.
That might be, I guess that maybe is the basis of the well-read pun that Funch is making.
So they go get pizza, good old Edna and Mucho. And as they're getting pizza, Mucho is like, do you hear that? And Oedipa is like, what? And he's like, she realizes he's talking about the like muzak that they're piping into the pizza parlor. And he's like, there's like that E string is like it's tuned a little tight. And like, if you listen closely, like I can not just hear the string, but I can like see the player and I can see the orchestra and like all of the frequencies are revealed to me.
Yeah, and she ends up piecing together that he's on LSD, prescribed by none other than Dr. Hilarious.
Now arrested.
They started a trial for husbands, too.
Yeah.
And she's not thrilled about that. She's like, she realizes that, like, quote, the day she'd left him for San Narciso was the day she'd seen Mucho for the last time. So much of him already had dissipated.
And this is kind of like a little bit of a different version of the kind of out-of-body ecstatic experience that Oedipa was having a few short hours ago, where he feels that like his self has totally dissipated into a multiplicity of everyone else who is currently living and ever has lived, in kind of like an unbroken frequency vibration. It's LSD stuff. This feels very much like Thomas Pynchon had some chats with people on LSD at points in time and maybe didn't enjoy those conversations.
It did get rid of his bad nightmare about the used car lot, though.
Which was predicated on a flashing sign for the National Automobile Dealers Association, the NADA, that just kept flashing nada, nada, nada at him. And again, we're at like, it's one thing with the periods and another thing without the periods.
You know, if there's one thing about Thomas Pynchon, he loves an acronym and he loves a pun.
Acronym versus initialism duel that is taking place in this book. Because WASTE is technically an initialism.
Yeah.
Throw that one out there in case anyone is concerned about the semantics.
We should all be concerned about the semantics, certainly. Yeah, Oedipa feels once again kind of like estranged and alienated by all of this. She desperately wants someone to just be like, yeah, it's all in your head. Just like leave it all behind. Come home. Come back to the Tupperware. There's more fondue to be had, and the Pierce stuff will sort itself out.
Well, yeah, and like unfortunately for Oedipa, even if there's nothing to this whole postal mystery or whatever was going on, like the fact that there are all these people in San Francisco that she encountered during this night, like that is true. And the fact that Pierce was like sort of an industrial capitalist, that's also true. And like the fact that like there's probably some icky stuff going on at Yoyodyne and its subsidiaries is also true. And so even if the conspiracy itself is not true, the reality of like the world and what's happening in it is true.
And like maybe, damn it, some of those like kids on at UC Berkeley like have the right idea. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Kind of feels like she's like, why am I who I am? It doesn't feel useful anymore, but she doesn't know how to be anybody else. Like she wants to be on a different side of history, but doesn't know how to get herself there.
Yeah, which putting it that way is a very different. I think the distinctions between this and V increasingly reveal themselves. Like that is a really distinct dilemma from anything that people are facing in that book. I mean, it's related in some ways, like the on and beneath the street kind of stuff, but
yeah, she seems to me to be picking up on threads. I mean, we've mentioned this before, like threads of Stencil, threads of Profane, honestly, threads of Rachel Hourglass also. But it is a distinct character from all three of those people, even if like at moments she's a voyeur and a drifter, and at moments she's, trying to solve a sort of mystery from fragmented clues, and at moments she's sort of like taking on like a mothering role.
She's trying to solve poverty by handing out a $10 bill.
Yeah, after fantasizing about a different solution anyways. But yeah, I think she is an interestingly different character. I'll be interested to see where she ends up. She feels almost more like lost to me than some of these other characters have, where like I feel like Benny Profane, like absolutely adrift, but he seemed sort of at home being adrift. Like that's where he was most comfortable. And I feel like Oedipa wants to be somewhere, but she's not there.
Well, any final thoughts on this chapter as we close the book for now?
It's a doozy.
Exhausting. It'll be interesting to see how this whole thing resolves. This finals chapter.
You don't seem especially hopeful that it's going to resolve in a satisfactory place, Andrew. Might you wish that there were 400 more pages to move you to that resolution?
No, because I feel like we still wouldn't get a resolution. I was thinking earlier when we were talking about the loose threads that we were having. I was like, we had that discussion on the final episode about V, of all the loose threads there, and that book was long, and this book isn't. So I feel like we're at the potential for a higher percentage of loose threads, or maybe your like loose thread per page metric is going to be big on this book, or maybe not. Maybe it's really tight ending.
We learn about this 800-year postal conspiracy, and it is all cleared up, Andrew.
We've got like one 30-page chapter left. I can only imagine that it is just exceptionally dense with information, because what else could it be?
I think Pig Bodine probably comes back and sings a few songs, and that'll wrap up the book.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey.
If there's a bunch of songs in these last 30 pages, when I'm like, Thomas, you could have been explaining yourself, and instead you're just Bilbo Bagginsing it across California.
We see another play.
I attended a talk at a conference one time that it was more of a humanities conference, but they had some radio telescope folks like talking about radio telescopes. And one of the things that they mentioned was that at like the highest degree of information density, like the least amount of like repetitive information. So, imagine like an alphabet or an alphabet is a bad example. Like say you had a symbol system where every single stroke, every single mark you could make had a totally discrete, understandable amount of information that it is conveying. And like there's no need to like repeat punctuation, or there's no need to repeat like past tense markers or anything like that.
Kind of like hieroglyphics?
Sort of, but like I think even like any kind of writing system is bound to have repetition, because like human languages are built on repeated parts that mean things if you say them again. But basically in a hypothetical like super, super dense symbol system, the signal of that symbology becomes indistinguishable from noise in a like mathematical or informatic sense, because everything means something.
Yeah. You
and
need repetition to pull meaning out of it.
Exactly. It's like doing like code breaking or something where...
But you don't have any like letter E.
Yeah, the Enigma machine, the Nazi code breakers figured out what Heil Hitler was because it was in all of the communications. And then they're like, okay, well, we know that repeats. But if you don't have any of that, it just becomes noise. And I've been thinking about that as I read through this book, both at a thematic level and also... I think it's a book where Thomas Pynchon makes a lot of noise in a very small, dense, little compact package.
Just a little book about entropy.
Just a little book about entropy.
Male.
And male.
And males. And how much they like ranting about esoteric topics.
I don't think we can, that's sort of a pot calling the kettle black situation as we wrap up our 3-hour-long podcast episode.
That's true. You are what you eat,
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening to Pynchon Pals. And thank you to Andrew Tillett.
Thank you, Patrick and Durian listeners.
And to Dury Long.
Thank you.
For joining me. If you like what we're doing here, we'd love it if you left us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. We haven't really gotten a review in a little while, and I'm not pointing fingers, but I know it's you. If you would like to support the show, you can do so at patreon.com/PynchonPals. That'll get you access to bonus episodes, including our recent watch of The Master, or our discussion of The Master, I should say, and an upcoming Q&A episode. You can send in questions, comments, concerns to pynchonpals@gmail.com. On our next episode, we'll be reading the final chapter of The Crying of Lot 49. That's chapter 6, and doing kind of like a wrap-up episode about it before we're going to be moving on here to Gravity's Rainbow pretty quickly. So get hype. The white whale is approaching. Our theme music is Horology by the inimitable King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, released under a Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives license on the album Polygon Dwanaland. Pynchon Pals is produced and edited by me, Patrick Fiorilli. You can find more of my work alongside my newsletter, Critical Theory Craft, at my website, www.patf.io. Until next time...
That's all, folks.
Excellent.
How long have you been sitting on that one?
Just while you're talking about horology.
Okay.
I got it.
I gotta blow my nose.
Jesus.
Fuck. You have tissues?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I just took a ice skating lesson, and Patrick was sitting in the rink for much of the ice skating lesson. I don't know if that's why your nose is sniffly, Patrick, but it was kind of chilly in there.
No, you took like a private lesson, Dury?
I did. Yeah, Patrick got it for me for Valentine's Day.
Oh, that's adorable.
Everyone in the rink really thought so. The instructor kept telling everyone that my husband bought me these lessons for Valentine's Day and how sweet she thought it was. I was like, Patrick, you were the talk of the rink.
That's awesome. She was just telling all the 5-year-olds figure skating.
She's like, her husband bought these lessons for her for Valentine's Day.
As a child, pirouettes past.
Yeah, in case you're wondering why this like clumsy woman is stumbling across the ice skating ring, it's because her husband bought her these.
This is great. Awesome. I'll leave that at the end of the pod. Just a little self-aggrandizement.